Chapter 1987. You're the cruel executioner. It's you, not me. Everything that you're in now is your own fault. After Mu Wanru lost consciousness for a short while, her hatred was revived. The expression on her face became even more ferocious and fierce, like a wild beast eyeing its prey. There had never been a woman who would display the ferocity of a wild beast. Mu Wanru's murderous aura was as frightening as that of a malicious spirit. I'll kill you! I'll kill you! Mu Wanru's desperate and hoarse roar reverberated on the huge rooftop, reverberating with waves of chilling, murderous intent. She also did not know where the terrifying strength came from. She suddenly got up and tangled with Yun Shirshir again. The two of them rolled a few meters away from the edge of the rooftop and started wrestling with each other, throwing punches at each other. A few meters away from the edge, as far as the eye could see, it was more than 100 meters high in the sky. Once they lost their footing and fell, they would be smashed to pieces. I'll kill you! I'll kill you! Yun Shirshir! You deserve to die! You deserve to die! Go to hell! Mu Wanru roared angrily as she hit her crazily. Yun Shirshir parried and fought back at the same time. The two of them were covered with cuts and bruises at the same time. Especially Mu Wanru, she was in an even more miserable state. Not only was there a wound on her face, blood was flowing from the back of her head. The hospital gown on her was also torn into tatters and did not cover her body at all. Yun Shirshir was in good condition. Only the corner of her mouth was bruised, and there was a bloody wound on her forehead, which was bleeding nonstop. Her clothes were stained with dust as they fought. However, Mu Wanru was determined to kill. Taking advantage of Yun Shirshir's distraction, she strangled her neck again. Yun Shirshir felt suffocated. Her vision turned black, and her throat felt like it was being crushed by a jack. She felt that her throat was about to be broken. Just when she felt that she was about to suffocate, bang! A loud sound was heard. In the next second, Mu Wanru's eyes widened, and her body stiffened horribly. Following that, she swayed and fell to one side. Yun Shirshir opened her eyes with difficulty. She covered her throat and was extremely defensive. Hua Jin's nervous face came into view. Shirshir, he helped her up and held her in his arms. His heart ached as he looked at the wounds all over her body. His eyes were filled with tears. Especially when she saw the scars on his forehead, she felt a great heartache. Don't be afraid. It's me, Hua Jin. I'm sorry. I'm late. Yun Shirshir instinctively wanted to defend herself and break free, but Hua Jin quickly and gently comforted her, finally calming her down. At first, when Yun Shirshir left the room, Hua Jin had planned to rest. But no matter how he thought about it, it felt strange. Based on his understanding of Qinzhou, what was so important that he couldn't say it over the phone or in the room? Why did he want to meet on the rooftop? It just so happened that the hotel's front desk system was hacked. How could there be such a coincidence? It was too strange. Hua Jin was so worried that he hurried to the rooftop. There were two passageways to the rooftop. Yun Shirshir took door A, but he took door B. Door B was already closed and locked. There was a door between the two passageways that he couldn't break through. He had no choice but to turn back and go through the elevator. Door A was not locked. When he arrived at the rooftop, he saw a shocking scene. Chapter 1988. If she was the slightest bit careless and fell from a height of more than 100 meters, she would undoubtedly be smashed to pieces. Hua Jin rushed over, picked up a broken iron pipe from the ground, and smashed it hard on Mu Wanru's head. When Yun Shirshir saw that it was him, she heaved a sigh of relief, and her whole body relaxed. You're here? Hua Jin. Yeah, I'm here. Don't be afraid. You're safe. You'll be fine. He comforted her in such a gentle voice, as if he was comforting a frightened child who had been awakened by a nightmare. He was the one who was the most afraid. If he had come a little later, who knew what this crazy woman would have done to her? The consequences would have been unimaginable. He should have known that this was probably a trap. Who would ask someone to meet on the rooftop in the middle of the night to talk? It was such a cold day, and Qin Zhou was not an idiot. She was so stupid to actually believe it. Nowadays, hacker technology was so advanced that it was not difficult to steal a person's phone IP to send a text message. Qin Zhou had clearly told her to stay in her room and not go anywhere. If there was anything, she could just call him. However, Yun Shishir had called him several times, but she could not get through. For a moment, she did not even think about the possibility of a hacker stealing her phone IP. She only suspected that Qin Zhou really had something important to say. In the end, she was confused because she was too concerned. After the soul-stirring fight, just now, her heart was still beating like thunder, and she could not calm down. Hua Jin carefully held her in his arms. His face was gentle and loving, and in the end, it more or less comforted her uneasy heartbeat. Yun Shishir's originally frightened heart was actually melted by his words. She let go of all her defenses and hugged him. She was still in shock and started to cry bitterly. It would have been better if she did not cry. Once she cried, Hua Jin's eyes could not help but moisten. In his eyes, Shishir was used to being a quiet and calm person. No matter how big the storm was, she would always be able to face it calmly. But what kind of terrible thing had she experienced to make her cry so hysterically? Perhaps he was really frightened. Hua Jin's heart ached for her grievances. He gently comforted her and gently patted her back to calm her down. At the same time, he gently kissed her forehead, as if he had just survived a disaster. "Good girl, it's my fault. I was careless and made you worried. Shishir, forgive me. Don't cry. My heart is about to break if you cry like this." Seeing her crying in his arms, Hua Jin finally understood what it meant to be heartbroken. Pain filled his entire heart. Yun Shishir gradually stopped crying. After she recovered some of her physical strength, she choked and said, "Let's get out of here quickly." "All right. Call the police." Yun Shishir gritted her teeth and spat out 2 words. She didn't know if Mu Wanru was still breathing, but she didn't dare to touch her. This was the primary crime scene. Right now, they should call the police immediately and let the police handle it. Okay. Hua Jin wanted to carry her, but this action affected the wound on her back. Hiss! Yun Shishir was in so much pain that she frowned. The rooftop was made of cement, and the ground was very rough with jagged gravel. The wound on her back was probably caused by the gravel during the scuffle. Yun Shishir insisted on walking on her own. Chapter 1989. Yun Shishir insisted on walking on her own. Hua Jin had no other choice. He placed her on the ground and supported her steadily, supporting her center of gravity. At the side, Mu Wanru was lying on the ground with her face facing the ground. Her knuckles suddenly moved, and her eyes suddenly opened, emitting a cold glint. However, all of Hua Jin's attention was focused on her, and he did not notice it at all. "Walk slowly, be careful." Just as he finished speaking, he suddenly heard hurried footsteps coming from behind him. He turned around abruptly, only to be shocked to find Mu Wanru, who had gotten up from the ground unknowingly, rushing toward him as if she were flying. He felt suffocated and subconsciously shielded Yun Shishir behind him. "Hua Jin, what are you doing?" What was he trying to do? Before Yun Shishir could recover from her shock, she heard a hysterical shout. "I'm going to kill you!" It was a roar that sounded like thunder. Mu Wanru rushed over without a care for anything else. Yun Shirshir also saw Mu Wanru charging over from the corner of her eye. She subconsciously exclaimed, but Hua Jin had already pulled her behind him, just as she reached out to grab his sleeve. However, in the midst of her shock, sparks flew. At that moment, it was as if she was in a bottomless ice cellar, and the chill was bone-chilling. The cold wind was biting cold. Under the moonlight, a sharp dagger flashed with an extremely dazzling cold glint in an instant. Then, in the next second, the sharp cold glint ruthlessly pierced through the flesh. It happened almost in an instant. Poof! A strange sound, the sound of flesh being pierced, caused her brain to immediately crash. Ugh! Hua Jin grunted, and the muscles on his face stiffened. A line of blood splattered on the ground. Immediately after, blood that was filled with the stench of blood flowed along the edge of the saber and dripped onto the ground. Yun Shirshir widened her eyes in shock. Her pupils reflected Hua Jin's painful and forbearing face, as well as Mu Wanru's ferocious and cruel gaze. Yun Shirshir, I'll kill you. I want you to die with me. Be buried with him. Hysterical screams resounded over and over again on the rooftop. Hua Jin gritted his teeth and lowered his head. A dagger ruthlessly pierced his abdomen. As she lowered her head, Mu Wanru held the dagger and exerted force once more, stabbing it even deeper. Hua Jin's body swayed slightly. His legs went soft, and he half knelt on the ground, frozen on the spot. Hua Jin. Hua Jin. Yun Shirshir stared blankly at this scene, especially at the blood-soaked ground. Her mind went blank in an instant. Tears welled up in her eyes. She gritted her teeth fiercely, and her eyes that were filled with monstrous rage swept towards Mu Wanru. You're the one who deserves to die. Yun Shirshir lunged over and choked her neck. She was in a state of extreme despair, so much so that she hysterically choked Mu Wanru's neck, determined to kill her. You're the one who deserves to die. Mu Wanru, you're the one who deserves to die. She was crying and shouting. Why did she always have to hurt others? Why did she have to resort to unscrupulous means to take revenge on others for her misfortune? I'll kill you. I'll kill you. Yun Shirshir choked her and forced her to the edge of the building, behind Mu Wanru. If she took another half step back, she would be 100,000 feet high in the sky. The wild evening wind tore at their clothes. You want me to die? Ha ha ha. Then let's perish together. Chapter 1990. Yun Shirshir shrank back, but Mu Wanru seemed determined to perish together with her. She took a step back, and her body fell down the building. Due to the heavy inertia and Mu Wanru's unrelenting grip on her hand, Yun Shirshir's center of gravity was dragged down by her as well. No! Hua Jin's screams could be heard from behind. Ha ha ha! Yun Shirshir, go to hell with me. The second before she fell, Mu Wanru threw her head back and laughed wantonly. Using all her strength, she cursed at her before her body plummeted to the ground at a rapid speed. Yun Shirshir was caught off guard and was brought down the edge of the building. The feeling of losing one's center of gravity was terrifying. She was about to fall from the sky. She imagined the scene of her body being smashed into pieces. It would be a horrible sight. In an instant, time seemed to have stopped, and the miserable state of death flashed before her eyes like a revolving lantern. Then, Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen's innocent smiles appeared before her eyes. Mommy! No, she couldn't die. She couldn't die. Her strong will to live made her whole body quiver. Yun Shirshir gasped for breath. Her body was about to leave the ground and fall to the ground. At this critical moment, she used all her strength. After calming down, she stretched out her hands and grabbed a steel pipe at the edge of the building. She managed to stabilize her center of gravity after holding on to it. However, her entire body was hanging outside the building. She glanced at the neon lights of the city below her. The city was bustling, and the stars were falling. Humans were as small as ants. Fear and uneasiness from the high altitude made her not dare to look down again. From the corner of her eye, she could only see Mu Wanru's free-falling figure. Her limbs were stretched out, and she was still letting out a heart-piercing, maniacal laughter. Her body was ethereal, like a thin piece of paper fluttering in the cold wind. At this moment, human life was actually so fragile. Being blown by the cold wind outside the tall building, it floated down to the ground. Immediately after, there was a loud bang. Even though he was more than 100 meters in the air, he could still clearly hear the sound of the collision with the ground. He could even hear the screams of the passers-by, which made his hair stand on end. Yin Shirshir closed her eyes tightly. Witnessing a person go from a fresh life to hell was so shocking. Tears flowed from the corners of his eyes. Yin Shirshir cried as she clung tightly to the edge. She desperately clung to the gap, but her arm strength was not enough to support all of her weight. In the past, when she saw people climbing cliffs on TV, she always felt anxious and helpless. However, after experiencing it personally, it turned out that a person's strength was so weak. She was on the brink of death. She didn't know how long she could hold on without anyone's help. If he was the slightest bit careless, even if it was the slightest loosening of his finger joint, he might fall into eternal damnation. Imagining the miserable scene of falling to the ground with her limbs twisted and her head bleeding, Yin Shirshir was scared out of her wits. She originally thought that she was very brave and was not afraid of the threat of death. However, facing death directly, no matter how deep one's understanding was, one was not so strong that one was not afraid of death. She then realized that she was actually so afraid of death. Hang in there. Shirshir. Chapter 1991. Yin Shirshir widened her eyes and saw Hua Jin's pained face. He crawled over with difficulty and reached out his hand to her. Hold on to me. Hold on to my hand. Yin Shirshir panted heavily and shook her head. No, you can't hold on to me. Trust me. Hua Jin endured the pain and stretched out his hand. Hold on to me. Yin Shirshir hesitantly tried to loosen her left hand. However, she only loosened a finger joint, and her body suddenly sank. She almost lost her grip and fell. At this moment, her whole body was tense. All her nerves and joints were in a deadlock. Even if she loosened a finger joint, she would lose her center of gravity. If she loosened her hand, Hua Jin would not be able to catch her in time, and she would fall. Hua Jin, I can still hold on. Sure, with your arm strength, you won't be able to hold on for long. Hua Jin's face was solemn and serious. He no longer had the playful and joking look he used to have. You won't be able to hold on for more than a minute. A woman's strength could not be compared to a man's. In this situation, even a man would not be able to turn danger into safety without anyone's help. Not to mention a weak woman who didn't even have the strength to truss a chicken. Be good, listen to me. I'll definitely catch you. Trust me, okay? Yin Shirshir was still hesitant. Large beads of sweat seeped out from her forehead. If I can't catch you, I'll accompany you. Hua Jin squeezed out a bitter smile and tried to reach out his hand to her. Trust me, Shirshir, I don't want you to die. Hua Jin said painfully, Please, I beg you, hold on to me. Yin Shirshir gritted her teeth. She couldn't care less anymore. She closed her eyes and made up her mind. She suddenly loosened her left hand and tried to reach out to him. When she loosened her hand, her right hand was not strong enough to support the weight of her body. She was about to fall in the next second. In the blink of an eye, Hua Jin reached out and grabbed her arm. I got you. He smiled in pleasant surprise and looked at her, but his face was already covered in cold sweat. Hua Jin. Yun Shirshir was also covered in cold sweat. She gasped for breath as she called out his name, tears continuously flowing down her cheeks. Hua Jin was stunned for a moment, but his lips curled into a smile. Then, with all his strength, he grabbed her arm and dragged her to his side. In Yun Shirshir's eyes, Hua Jin was so thin and weak that he couldn't even withstand a single blow. She didn't know that there was such a great power hidden in his body. Although it only took a dozen seconds, it felt like a century. He dragged half of her body up. Yun Shirshir crawled on the ground and tried her best to climb up. Lying on the ground, she was so tired that she panted. "Thank you." Yun Shirshir looked up and saw that Hua Jin seemed to have exhausted all his energy. He was lying on the ground, unconscious. "Hua Jin," she reached out and pushed his shoulder gently. From the corner of her eye, she saw a pool of blood under his body. It was a shocking sight. She turned back and saw a long mottled trail of blood. He actually crawled over from where he stood. His abdomen was injured and blood was flowing out from the wound. Hua Jin, wake up, don't scare me." Yun Shirshir held his face in fear and patted it again and again. Chapter 1992. His handsome but pale face was covered in cold sweat. His eyes were tightly shut, but his eyelashes were trembling faintly. "Hua Jin, don't scare me. I beg you, don't scare me." Yun Shirshir desperately helped him up. She didn't have time to think too much. She held his arm and tried to help him up, but his body was so weak that he couldn't maintain his center of gravity. He had already fainted. Yun Shirshir was extremely scared. She didn't know where Mu Wanru had stabbed him. She didn't know if it was a vital part. She cried, begged, and prayed. She carried Hua Jin on her back and staggered down the stairs. "Help! Help! Someone save me! Someone save me!" Yun Shirshir carried Hua Jin all the way to the elevator. Her screams for help echoed in the empty corridor. But no one responded. There was no one on the 27th floor. Yun Shirshir stood at the entrance of the elevator and pressed the button with all her might. However, the indicator light on the screen was still on the 17th floor. She didn't know why, but it didn't move. There was only one elevator light that led to the 27th floor. The elevator stayed on the 17th floor and didn't move. She was going crazy. "Hurry! Hurry!" Yun Shirshir pressed the button crazily. Finally, the number started to jump, but it stopped at the 20th floor. "Hurry!" Yun Shirshir urged at the top of her lungs. She almost broke the button. Just as she was about to break down, the elevator stopped and finally reached the 28th floor. Yun Shirshir was so anxious that she was about to cry. When the elevator door opened, Yun Shirshir carried Hua Jin and rushed in recklessly. There were many people standing in the elevator. They saw a woman covered in blood suddenly rushing in from the dark corridor. She was carrying a man on her back, and they didn't know if he was dead or alive. They screamed in fear. "Ah!" Yun Shirshir couldn't take it anymore and asked them for help. "Call 120. Hurry up." "What's the situation? What happened?" "A terrorist attack." So much blood. Yun Shirshir was on the verge of tears. She pleaded again and again, "Call the police. I beg you, call the police." All right. It was probably because they saw how helpless she was, and how she didn't seem like a bad person. The man she was carrying was unconscious, covered in blood, and looked like he was on his last breath. These people reacted quickly and immediately picked up their phones to call 120. The other one was more quick-witted. He even helped her call the police and briefly explained the situation. The elevator soon reached the first floor. With everyone's help, Hua Jin was carefully carried out. The lobby manager at the front desk was on duty. He had just received a call saying that someone had fallen off the building and was about to go out to check on the situation. When he saw this scene, he was scared out of his wits. "Where is the infirmary?" Yun Shirshir grabbed the manager's clothes and asked anxiously, "Miss, please calm down." "How am I supposed to calm down when he's already dying?" "Take him to the infirmary and stop the bleeding." All right. Although the lobby manager didn't understand the situation, he still led Yun Shirshir to the infirmary. "Shirshir." All of a sudden, Hua Jin let out a feeble voice. Yun Shirshir immediately went over. I'm here. Okay. Chapter 1993. Hearing her voice, Hua Jin instantly closed his eyes in relief. Yun Shirshir held his hand tightly. However, his hand was cold and devoid of warmth, probably due to the excessive blood loss. She furrowed her brows anxiously. Hua Jin suddenly opened his eyes slowly. His worried gaze landed on her as he kept probing back and forth. "What's wrong?" Yun Shirshir immediately went forward to ask, thinking that he needed something. However, the first sentence that came out of his mouth was an extremely hoarse question. "Are you injured?" For a moment, Yun Shirshir felt as though her throat was blocked by something, and she couldn't make a sound, especially when she saw the ghastly red wound on Hua Jin's abdomen. She instantly burst into tears. She clenched her teeth to stop herself from crying out loud. However, when she thought of who this man in front of her was on the brink of death, she instantly felt as though a knife was being twisted in her heart. Remorse, self-blame, sadness, worry, all sorts of emotions welled up in her heart. Her tears flowed into the gaps of her lips, and her mouth was filled with bitterness. Why did you do this?" Yun Shirshir knew in her heart that Hua Jin had been stabbed with a dagger, and it was already very serious. However, in order to save her, he had actually crawled so far away. The friction between the wound and the cement floor was an incalculable secondary injury. Furthermore, he had dragged her so forcefully. The wound must have been torn open by an external force. She didn't know how ruthless Mu Wanru had been, and she didn't even know if this wound had hurt any vital parts. Yun Shirshir was so anxious that she was going crazy. She really didn't know if anything happened to Hua Jin, she really wouldn't be able to forgive herself. "Don't cry. You look so stupid," Hua Jin smiled. His signature playful smile appeared on his sickly pale face. He said casually, "Actually, it doesn't hurt that much. It's just like being bitten by a mosquito. Those movies are too exaggerated. How could it hurt that much?" Yun Shirshir was so angry that her face turned ashen. It was already like this, but he could still joke about it so casually. He actually said that being stabbed didn't hurt at all. Hua Jin joked as he endured the excruciating pain. His originally clear and bright eyes seemed to have turned gloomy at this moment. He looked at her quietly, wanting to say something but not wanting to do so. "Don't worry, okay? I'll be fine. Stop joking around." Damn it! Only the heavens knew that she was almost worried to death, yet he still had the leisure to talk about these things. Even though she knew that Hua Jin was only saying this to lessen her guilt and not let her worry too much. But seeing him forcefully holding back, even the cold sweat on his forehead silently betrayed him. It was obviously very painful, but he still said that it was nothing. After everyone carried Hua Jin into the infirmary, the doctor saw this scene and then looked at the man who was lying on the bed with his abdomen bleeding nonstop. He turned pale with fright. He was originally dozing off, but he was instantly jolted awake. He hurriedly prepared the tools to stop the bleeding. "Sorry, everyone, please leave us for a moment." Yun Shirshir didn't want to leave and wanted to guard him. Seeing her so persistent, the doctor asked, Madam, are you his family? Yes. Almost without hesitation, Yun Shir blurted out and answered firmly. Chapter 1994. I'm his family. Let me stay here to accompany him, okay? He needs me. Yun Shir spoke, resolutely and decisively. Seeing that she was persistent, the doctor did not chase her away. He closed the door and quickly turned back to treat the wound. Treating the wound was just a simple assessment of the injury and treatment to stop the bleeding. He cleaned the wound to prevent a second infection. Yun Shir stood at the side, trembling in fear. Hua Jin, on the other hand, stared at her without blinking. His heart seemed to be filled with warmth, and it was incomparably warm. I'm his family. Let me stay here to accompany him, okay? He needs me. Hua Jin's lips trembled, and his eyes suddenly curved in satisfaction. An unprecedented warmth hit his heart. This was probably the warmth of being protected by family. Yun Shir obviously did not notice his expression. Instead, she was fully focused on the doctor's every move. She could not help but observe the expression on his face, trying to find some information from his expression. She could see that the doctor's expression was grave. His brows were tightly knitted, and his expression was especially serious. Sometimes he would frown deeply, and she was even more worried. She could not help but tear up. Hua Jin saw that she was about to cry, and his heart ached. Shir, his feeble voice immediately alarmed her. Yun Shir hurried to his side and squatted down gently. She carefully held his outstretched hand. What's wrong? I feel very sleepy. I want to sleep for a while. Sleepy? Yun Shir was even more flustered at this moment. She raised her head to look at the doctor for help. Doctor, the doctor was fully focused on stopping the bleeding and had no time to care about her pleas. Will you always be with me? Hua Jin suddenly asked. Yun Shir turned to look at him and nodded desperately. I will always be with you. After a pause, she looked at him with teary eyes and pleaded, Hua Jin, don't scare me, okay? How do you feel now? Does it still hurt? Where does it hurt? It hurts everywhere. The current him found it difficult to even say a few words, and his eyes were slowly closing. Don't sleep. Yun Shir was just about to say something when a flurry of footsteps came from outside the door. The ambulance is here. Someone shouted from outside the door. The doctor had just finished his work to stop the bleeding and immediately opened the door. Outside the door, several medical staff rushed in. Where are the injured? Here. Has the bleeding stopped? We've already stopped the bleeding, but we don't know the condition of the wound. We need to do a further examination to know the extent of the injury. What's his blood pressure? A group of people hurriedly brought a stretcher over. The paramedics anxiously placed the patient on the stretcher and secured him before rushing to the ambulance. Hua Jin closed his eyes as if he had fainted. Amidst the hubbub of voices, Yun Shir suddenly felt that the world had suddenly become deathly silent. Every scene she saw had lost its color, and all the scenes had become incomparably slow. The voices of those arguing were especially piercing. Hua Jin was placed on the stretcher. His expression was calm, and his face was pale as he was escorted away. Chapter 1995. Wait a minute. Yun Shir immediately called out to the ambulance. However, the next second, the door of the ambulance was tightly shut. Accompanied by the sound of the siren, the ambulance sped away. At the side, many onlookers were pointing at the scene. What happened? Someone jumped off the building, and a man was stabbed with a knife. He lost a lot of blood. Stabbed with a knife? Can he still be saved? He should be fine. You don't understand. In the past, when I was studying, there was a gang fight at the school gate. I saw a person who was stabbed in the abdomen. He held the wall and knelt on the ground for more than 20 minutes before he fell unconscious. When the ambulance arrived, he was pronounced dead on the spot. So scary. Yeah, they said that the knife pierced his liver, but it was useless at that time. Young people nowadays, they don't cherish their lives at all. I thought it was a mafia meeting in the movies. They even fought. Anyway, if he was stabbed with a knife and lost a lot of blood, he could still be saved. I'm afraid that if his organs were stabbed, then, sigh, do you think it's some farce between the first wife and the mistress? I'm not sure. It's really bad luck. Yun Shirshir stood on the spot in a daze. Her face was numb. She saw people crowding around the entrance and pointing at something on the ground. She walked over absent-mindedly and saw a body on the ground with twisted limbs and a bleeding head. It was Mu Wanru. Yun Shirshir only took a glance and was so shocked that she turned her head away and didn't dare to take another look. The way she died was too gruesome. She fell from the rooftop and was blown by the wind for more than 10 meters. Finally, she landed in the middle of the square, which was the parking area. The person who fell from the sky made a dent in the roof of the car, and the windshield was shattered into snowflakes. When the body landed on the ground, the limbs were twisted in a very strange way, especially the head. It was deformed. The back of the head was cracked open. The passers-by, especially the children, were so frightened that they screamed and cried. Many passers-by looked curiously, but they were frightened by the gruesome death and frowned. It's too scary. Even the brain matter is out. You're so young. Is it necessary for you to take things too hard? That's right. Some people want to live, but have no way to live. Some people can live a good life, but don't want to live. I really don't understand. She had never seen such a cruel death. In his impression, jumping off a building was still a scene in the movies. He didn't expect that death in real life would be so cruel. After the ambulance left, the police car arrived. After the lobby manager was interrogated, he immediately brought his men to the scene to investigate. A police cordon was set up at the scene. The police walked in and squatted down to examine the body. So pitiful. How did you fall? His head is crushed. Yun Shirshir, who was standing at the side, suddenly said, I fell from the 28th floor, from the rooftop. The policeman jerked his head up. How did you know? Because Yun Shirshir tugged at the corner of her lips. I watched her fall with my own eyes. Qin Zhou was awakened by the urgent ringing of the doorbell. He was tired after a long day of running around. Hence, when he returned to the hotel, he went to bed early. When he was awakened by the doorbell, he raised his watch to look at the time. It was 2 a.m. Chapter 1996. Hello, I'm the room manager. May I know if you're Mr. Qin? Yes. It's like this. May I know if Ms. Yun Shirshir is a friend of yours? When Qin Zhou heard that, he felt nervous and opened the door. The room manager stood at the door with an anxious and guilty look on her face. Qin Zhou asked, what happened to her? It's like this. Ms. Yun Shirshir is suspected of intentional homicide and has been taken away by the police for investigation. Qin Zhou was taken aback. Intentional homicide? He suddenly laughed. Are you kidding me? The room manager smiled politely. I'm not kidding. As she said that, she handed over a business card with both hands. Qin Zhou took it. It was a police officer's business card from the Public Security Bureau. The address and contact information of the police station were written on it. Qin Zhou took a look, and his expression instantly froze. He raised his head and frowned. When was she taken away? Just 15 minutes ago. Suspected homicide. Since she's suspected of homicide, who is the victim? It's a woman. Her identity is still unknown, so we can't know too much. The room manager nodded at him. I've already reported the situation to you. Do you have any other instructions? No. Okay. The room manager turned and left. Chin-jo held the business card tightly in his hand and hurried back to his room. He changed into casual clothes and rushed to the police station's address written on the business card. When he reached the entrance of the hotel and was about to hail a taxi, he saw the flashing lights of an ambulance. He glanced over and saw that the body had been processed and was about to be sent to the morgue. However, the pool of blood on the ground was still very eye-catching, even though it was late at night and the lights were dim. The weather was cold, and the blood had already coagulated. Chin-jo furrowed his brows and watched the ambulance leave. A chill inexplicably emerged from his heart. In the police station, the incandescent lights were bright and dazzling. Yun Shirshir held a cup. She did not feel thirsty, but her hands were too cold, and she wanted to use the cup to warm herself. A few policemen sat facing her with pens in their hands. They were interrogating her and taking her statements. It was quiet in the interrogation room. Only the loud and powerful voices of the policemen kept echoing in her ears. Could it be that all the policemen's voices were like loud bells to intimidate criminals? The statements had been taken for an hour. The continuous questioning made her exhausted. Questioning? Rather than calling it questioning, it was more appropriate to call it an interrogation. God knew how urgent she'd be. She wanted to end the interrogation quickly. Hua Jin was still in the hospital, and it was unknown if he was dead or alive. She couldn't stop worrying, but at this moment, she had no choice but to do a boring and torturous interrogation of the interrogation. Even though she had tried to explain herself, perhaps it was a form of interrogation. These police officers were questioning her as if she was a criminal suspect. She really didn't kill us, she didn't. Yun Shirshir wearily faced the few police officers who were interrogating her and defended herself again. Officers, you don't have to be so tough. I really didn't kill anyone. When will you let me go? Chapter 1997. Yun Shirshir sneered. So, is this also a way for you to collect evidence? You're obviously pressuring me on purpose. If you didn't do it, why would you feel pressured? Only those who did something wrong will feel pressured. Yun Shirshir felt that she couldn't defend herself. She lowered her head, unable to refute. Didn't you say that someone asked you to go to the rooftop? Yun Shirshir nodded. She felt that her last bit of patience had been worn out. She could only answer their questions numbly. As an interrogator, the police officers were very particular with their words. Every word was especially rigid and particular. They couldn't be careless and were very strict. Yun Shirshir was very tired from answering. Yes, I received a message from a friend. Which friend? My manager. What's your manager's name? Chin-jo. What about the content of the message? Where's your mobile phone? It's not on me. I think I left it on the rooftop. The police officer immediately stood up and called his colleague who was in charge of investigating the crime scene. He requested to go to the rooftop to search for evidence. Why did your friend ask you to go to the rooftop? I don't know either. You went to the rooftop without knowing? Isn't this too unreasonable? Since you said that your friend asked you to go to the rooftop, but you said that you met the deceased on the rooftop, but your friend didn't appear. Isn't this even more unreasonable? God knows what was going on. She really did receive Chin-jo's message. At that time, she didn't think too much about it. Although she felt that there was something fishy about it, Chin-jo did have a sudden stroke sometimes. He once asked her to go to the riverside in the middle of the night to enjoy the cold wind. Hence, when Yun Shirshir received the message, she didn't have much suspicion. Now that she thought about it, there were indeed many loopholes. For example, she couldn't get through to the phone. Until now, she still couldn't figure it out. As for Mu Wanru, she also couldn't figure out why she suddenly appeared on the rooftop. What was more frightening was that when she turned on her mobile phone and was about to take a picture, she suddenly appeared in the front camera. That terrifying scene still lingered in her mind and couldn't be erased. It was simply a live-action mystery film. Right now, she was not in the mood to be interrogated. Her heart was filled with worry about Hua Jin's condition in the hospital. Is he okay? Did it worsen? Previously, when he was at the entrance of the hotel, he heard the passers-by talking. One of them said that his abdomen was injured, and if his organs were stabbed, he would not be able to be saved, especially when he had lost too much blood. When she thought of Hua Jin's sickly pale face before he was sent to the ambulance, Yun Shishir's heart jumped again. My friend is still in the hospital. Can I go and see him? He's injured? Is it serious? No. The police officer sternly refused. You're not going anywhere until you're done with your statement. Yun Shishir leaned against the back of the chair dejectedly and looked up at the chandelier on the ceiling. Her eyes were empty for a moment. When Qin arrived at the police station, he did a simple registration and walked over. Yun Shishir was sitting in the interrogation room. The third round of interrogation had just ended, but she still couldn't leave. She sat there alone, feeling lonely and helpless. The door of the interrogation room was locked from the inside. Through the glass window, he saw Yun Shishir furrowing her brows, looking very tired. He knocked on the window. Chapter 1998. However, Qin could not hear her at all. The isolation effect in the interrogation room was very strong. Hence, Yun Shishir could not hear what Qin was saying. Yun Shishir could only mouth to him, "Get me out of here." Qin understood and nodded. Through the glass, he comforted her with his gaze and turned to settle the paperwork. In less than half an hour, the bail was paid and everything was settled. When Yun Shishir followed Qin out of the police station, she briefly recounted what had happened. However, Qin was baffled by what he heard. "I didn't send you that kind of message." "What?" Qin looked serious. "Listen, I'm not joking. Even if I had the guts, I wouldn't dare to ask you to go to the rooftop in the middle of the night." "Then what about the message?" "I didn't send it." Qin swore and even took out his mobile phone to show her. In the records, there was indeed no such message. "Then what's going on?" "I called your mobile phone, but I couldn't get through." "How could that be?" Qin quickly dialed a number, but the call was normal. Yun Shishir felt that something was amiss. She stared at him with her eyes wide open, her thoughts in a mess. "Shishir, don't tell me you're sleepwalking. You've been too nervous for the past 2 days, so you didn't have a good rest." "Impossible. I would never sleepwalk. But I really didn't kill anyone. Even if I hate that woman, I would never do such a thing." However, she did not deny it. There was indeed a moment when she had the urge to push Mu Wanru down the stairs or strangle her. When people were in extreme fear and anxiety, or even when they were angry, they would often lose their rationality. However, that was also a legitimate defense. If she did not do that, she might have died in Mu Wanru's hands. Moreover, the truth was that Mu Wanru wanted to pull her down the stairs and jump off the building. At most, it was suicide. She did not kill her. It was not even considered manslaughter. However, there was no sufficient evidence to prove that she had nothing to do with Mu Wanru's death. The difficulty of this matter far exceeded her expectations and imagination. Qin comforted her. "Don't worry, I believe in you." "Yes." Yun Shishir suddenly let out a sigh. Her eyebrows looked tired. "But the police's evidence right now is very unfavorable to me. There's not enough evidence to prove my innocence." Qin also frowned. He felt that there were many suspicious things about this matter. There must be something fishy about this. I will send someone to investigate as soon as possible. Now, send me to the hospital. Huajin is still there. Huajin? Qinzhou was confused. What's wrong with him? Time is of the essence. I'll tell you more on the way. All right. Qinzhou walked to the side of the road with her, hailed a taxi, and hurried to the hospital. Before Huajin was sent to the ambulance, she had asked about the hospital. Hence, she knew which hospital Huajin was sent to. In the car, Yun Shishir asked anxiously, Qinzhou, will Huajin be all right? I don't know what kind of injury he has. If his organs are not damaged, then it's a blessing. If he is injured, he did not continue. However, when Yun Shishir saw the grave expression on his face, her heart skipped a beat. If anything happens to him, Yun Shishir's voice stopped abruptly. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Chapter 1999. Don't think too much. Qinzhou could only comfort her in this way. When they arrived at the hospital, Yun Shishir rushed to the information desk and reported Hua Jin's name. Hua Jin. The nurse shook her head with a blank expression. We can't find out anything about this patient. It's his abdomen injury. Not long ago, he was sent to the hospital for emergency treatment. Madam, please don't be nervous. We can't find any information about the name you asked for. As for the information you provided, I'm sorry, there were 2 patients who were sent to the hospital with abdomen injuries. I don't know who you're referring to. He's very young, in his early 20s. He's very good looking. Yun Shishir described anxiously. The nurse thought for a moment and called for another paramedic. Immediately, the paramedic walked up and said with a straight face, You're the patient's family member, right? Yes. Come with me. Okay. Yun Shishir and Qinzhou immediately followed the paramedic. Along the way, the atmosphere was heavy. Yun Shishir felt as if there was a huge rock pressing on her heart. She was about to suffocate. After that, the paramedic brought them to a small room beside the emergency room. Yun Shishir had just walked to the door when she smelled a pungent smell of disinfectant. She couldn't help but frown. The paramedic opened the door casually. Inside the room, there was a gurney. There was a person lying on the gurney. His face was covered by a white cloth, and he looked lifeless. The huge room was filled with an inexplicable sadness and bleakness, as well as a heavy aura of death. Qinzhou was a little stunned. The medical staff turned around and looked at her sympathetically. His tone was solemn. My condolences. The patient's condition is very serious. He lost all signs of life when he was sent to the hospital. We're already waiting for his family to deal with him. What? Yun Shishir didn't seem to believe her ears. She looked at him suspiciously and interrupted him. The person lying here is the person you're looking for. Yun Shishir shook her head and forced a smile. That's impossible. Didn't you say that he's in his early 20s and is very good looking? Yes, Yun Shishir looked at him, her mind blank. The medical staff shook his head and said solemnly, I can understand how you feel, but the world is unpredictable. I hope you can accept reality. My condolences. Impossible. Yun Shishir couldn't accept the reality. Her eyes widened and tears gushed out. He can't be dead. There's a large area of trauma on the abdomen, causing the bleeding to stop. His organs were damaged, and he lost blood quickly. On the way to the hospital, the patient was already in a state of shock. It's a pity. We've done our best. Impossible. Yun Shishir cried out in pain. She knelt on the ground helplessly, unable to accept this cruel reality. He won't die. Before he was sent to the hospital, he even joked with me. How could it be? How could it be? My condolences. These 3 words completely crushed all her thoughts. Yun Shirshir felt completely disheartened. Tears rolled down from her eyes, and her heart ached so much that she was about to suffocate. Impossible. Hua Jin was still so young and in good health. Before he was sent to the ambulance, he could still hold her hand tightly. At this moment, she could still feel his warmth in her palm. It was so real. How could they be separated by life and death in the blink of an eye? Chapter 2000. Didn't he casually say that it didn't hurt at all? 5 hours ago, he was still alive and kicking. Why was he lying in such a lifeless room now? A few doctors came into the room with reports in their hands. They looked serious, as if they were discussing something. Yun Shirshir saw their furrowed brows and only heard the cold words confirmed comma dead and vital signs. She froze on the spot, her body stiffening. Qin Zhou stood at the side and frowned. He looked incredulous. Hua Jin was dead. How could it be? He couldn't accept this fact. Qin Zhou walked forward and gently held Yun Shirshir's arm. He wanted to help her up, but she was half kneeling on the ground. Her eyes were wide open and tears flowed out of her eyes. Hua Jin, you can't die. His warm voice was still vivid in her mind. However, the cold feeling of death surrounded her. She couldn't accept this cruel reality. Shirshir, calm down. Qin Zhou couldn't bear to see her like this and helped her up. Yun Shirshir covered her face and cried bitterly. Her cries alarmed a few doctors. They immediately surrounded her and comforted her. Madam, please restrain your grief. Don't hurt your body. The world is unpredictable. The dead are gone. The living should face life with a smile. 9 out of 10 things in life don't go your way. Yun Shirshir couldn't listen to a single word. She covered her face and cried bitterly. Suddenly, there was a series of hurried and messy footsteps outside the door. A man's heart-wrenching howl was heard. Xinr. Xinr. Qin Zhou was startled. He turned around in confusion and saw a man in his late 20s or early 30s stumbling into the room. He threw himself at the side of the blood-stained bed and hugged the corpse as he cried out loud. Xinr. Xinr. Which bastard did this to you? Which bastard did this to you? You were fine. How could you be gone? Gone just like that. You were clearly fine this morning. Before Yun Shirshir could react, a few more family members rushed in from outside the door. There were both men and women. They threw themselves at the bedside and wailed. Xin, daughter, my good daughter, don't die. You can't die. Do you have the heart to abandon your husband and child? Yun Shirshir and Qin Zhou were completely stunned by the deafening cries. This was especially so for Yun Shirshir. 2 streams of tears were still hanging on her face. For a moment, she didn't know whether to continue crying or to stop and observe the situation first. Xinr? What Xinr? He must have mistaken the corpse for someone else. Yun Shirshir and Qin Zhou looked at each other awkwardly, just as they were in a daze. The man who had rushed in first suddenly stood up agitatedly, turned around, and glared fiercely at Qin Zhou. He then strode forward and grabbed the latter's collar. Qin Zhou was even more confused. He frowned and glared at him. What are you doing? Is it you? Is it you? Are you the one who killed my Xin? The man was so agitated that he spat saliva all over Qin Zhou's face. Qin Zhou didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I don't know what you're talking about. What Xinr? Chapter 2001. A few doctors rushed over to help. Sir, please calm down. I think you've misunderstood. This gentleman isn't the culprit who stabbed your wife. That culprit is also injured, but he's being interrogated in the police station now. The man realized that it was a misunderstanding and immediately let go of Qin Zhou. He smiled apologetically at him. Qin Zhou tidied up his crumpled shirt and glanced at the bed. His anger had yet to subside. He suppressed his displeasure and asked calmly, "Is the person on the bed your wife?" "Yes, you are." Yun Shirshir had a strange expression on her face. She was immediately speechless. She walked over and carefully lifted the white cloth. From the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of the deceased's long hair. She heaved a sigh of relief and covered her face again. "What are you doing?" The man's face was livid. He pushed her away and glared at her. He was obviously furious at her rude behavior. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding." A woman's awkward voice came from outside the door. "Chairman Qin, Shirshir, what are you doing?" Yun Shirshir and Qin Zhou turned their heads in unison, only to see Hua Jin's manager looking at them in bewilderment. "Yuqi." Qin Zhou was also shocked. Yuqi glanced at the corpse in the ward and speechlessly twitched the corner of her lips. She let out a few awkward laughs. "Don't tell me you've got the wrong person." Half an hour later, in the intensive care unit, Hua Jin lay quietly on the bed. His face was pale and his skin was sickly thin. His eyes were tightly shut. His handsome and beautiful face, at this moment, did not have a trace of life due to excessive blood loss. He was very thin. Usually, he could hide it with makeup. Now, without all the adornments, his thin face was exposed. He was too thin, especially his wrist, which was about the same size as hers. He had lost too much blood and needed 2 bags of blood. Yun Shirshir sat by the bed and glanced at the tag hanging on the bed. Hua Jin's real name was Rong Jin, so that was his name. Rong Jin, is his surname Rong? Yun Shirshir stared at Hua Jin's face in a daze. Other than her and Hua Jin's manager, Ji Yuqi, was also in the ward. After getting along on the plane, Yun Shirshir and Ji Yuqi got along well. Qin Zhou went out to take care of some affairs. Since it was confirmed that both of them were fine, there were still many things left to deal with. Ji Yuqi sat on the edge of the bed, peeling an apple as she sighed. "I received a call from the hospital in the middle of the night saying that Hua Jin was injured. I was so scared that I cried as I took a taxi to the hospital, but it turned out to be a false alarm. The doctor said that he had stabbed his appendix with a knife and cut it off. It was nothing serious, but he had lost a lot of blood and needed a blood transfusion. However, there was a scar on her abdomen. In the future, she would have to think of a way to deal with the scar. Otherwise, it would be very awkward to shoot a photo." Ji Yuqi was still thinking about the future of her career. She was more worried that Hua Jin's injury would affect her upcoming jobs. If she met with a difficult organizer, she would have to face a sky-high penalty. Secondly, having a scar on her body was a big taboo for an idol. Yun Shirshir suddenly felt a great heartache for Hua Jin. Chapter 2002. However, she felt that in Ji Yuqi's eyes, Hua Jin was a commodity without any value other than a money tree. She couldn't feel how much Ji Yuqi cared about Hua Jin. At least, even if she cared, it was only about how much profit she would lose after the loss of a commodity. She was too cold. From the moment she entered the ward until now, what Ji Yuqi mentioned the most was the series of losses brought about by Hua Jin's injury. In fact, in Ji Yuqi's eyes, Yun Shirshir was a problem. To Hua Jin, she was a problem. To her, she was even more of a problem. Earlier on, when Hua Jin revealed his longing and yearning for Yun Shirshir, she had ruthlessly interrupted Hua Jin's thoughts. On the surface, Ji Yuqi was his manager, but in reality, she was the guardian that woman placed by Hua Jin's side. She monitored Hua Jin's every move. Hence, she was extremely guarded against Yun Shirshir. Yun Shirshir suddenly asked, "What's the situation with Exion Air just now?" Ji Yuqi thought for a moment and said, "I heard that she was robbed in the middle of the night. When she resisted, she was stabbed twice by the robber and died on the spot." So pitiful. She thought that it was Hua Jin and cried for a long time. In the end, she got the wrong person and made a mistake. Luckily, Hua Jin didn't see this scene. Otherwise, he would definitely laugh at her like an idiot. The apple was peeled, cut into pieces, and placed on a plate. Ji Yuqi wiped her fingers with a wet tissue and looked up. Her face had returned to its usual cold expression. Sure, I want to talk to you about something." As for me, I hope you can keep a distance from Hua Jin." As Ji Yuqi spoke, she placed the plate on the table and looked at her warily. "You're too close to him." Yun Shirshir was stunned for a moment. She looked at her questioningly and curled her lips. "What do you mean by that?" "I know. It's Hua Jin who has been trying to get close to you. However, you should also know that a child like Hua Jin is still immature. He has no idea what kind of price he would have to pay for doing such a thing." Yun Shirshir suddenly interrupted her coldly. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Then I'll be straightforward." Ji Yuqi suddenly raised her eyebrows and smiled deeply. "Didn't anyone warn you to keep a distance from Hua Jin when you stepped into this circle?" Yun Shirshir frowned. Of course, someone had warned him. Qin Zhou alone had warned him more than once. However, she did not know the reason. "Why?" "Because if you get too close to him, you'll hurt him and yourself," Ji Yuqi said honestly. "Shut up." Hua Jin's irritated scolding suddenly came from the bed. Ji Yuqi and Yun Shirshir were startled and looked at the bed together. "Hua Jin, you're awake. You're awake," they asked almost in unison. Hua Jin had woken up unknowingly. He slowly opened his eyes and glanced coldly at Ji Yuqi from the corner of his eyes. However, there was a look of disgust in his eyes. It was an inexplicable hostility. It was obvious that Hua Jin and Ji Yuqi did not have a good relationship. Most artists and managers, even if they were not as close as family, would at least get along well with each other. From the plane ride, it was obvious that Hua Jin was quite cold towards Ji Yuqi. Sometimes, when he spoke to her, he was very impatient. It was as if he did not hear her words. Chapter 2003. Hua Jin wanted to get up, but Yun Shirshir stopped him immediately. "You can't move yet. Your wound has just been stitched up. If you move around, the stitches will come off." Her concern warmed his heart. He smiled warmly and nodded. "Ma'am, I'll listen to you." He was as obedient as a little lamb. Even Ji Yuqi was surprised. "Yeah, Hua Jin, don't move around. Be careful of your wound. You talk too much." Hua Jin looked at her, and his face turned cold. "Did I ask you to speak?" Ji Yuqi wanted to say something, but stopped herself. She pursed her lips awkwardly and then brought over a cut apple. "Have some fruit." "Go away." Hua Jin waved his hand. Crash! The container fell to the ground and broke into pieces. Yun Shirshir widened her eyes in shock. "Get out. I don't want to see you." "Hua Jin, get out. Didn't you hear me?" Hua Jin stared at her angrily. Ji Yuqi had no other choice. She bit her lip and stood up awkwardly. Then she told Yun Shirshir, "Please take care of him." With that, she turned and left the ward. With a bang, the door was shut tight. Hua Jin supported himself on the bed with both hands and tried to sit up. Yun Shirshir walked over immediately and said, "Can't you just lie down?" "I want to sit up." Hua Jin pouted and whined like a willful child. Yun Shirshir couldn't do anything to him. She raised the bedboard a little and carefully helped him sit up. She also stuffed a few soft pillows behind his back to make him more comfortable. Hua Jean looked at her in silence. His face was pale, and he looked a little helpless. He was so nervous that he didn't know where to place his hands. When Yun Shirshir sat down, she looked up and saw him staring at her. "Why do you keep staring at me? That's nice." "So, the feeling of being taken care of is so warm." "Hua," Jean murmured in satisfaction. Yun Shirshir was stunned. "Is there no one to take care of you?" Hua Jean shook his head and pursed his lips. "Only you." Yun Shirshir couldn't help but feel suspicious. Hua Jean patted the edge of the bed. "Don't be so far away from me. We can be considered comrades who have gone through thick and thin together." "Who's your comrade?" She pouted coquettishly, and then sat closer to him. Hua Jin said coquettishly, "Come closer." Yun Shirshir couldn't stop him and sat closer to him. When she sat closer, Hua Jin held her hand. Yun Shirshir felt as if she had touched a piece of hot iron and subconsciously flung it away. Hua Jin's facial features instantly contorted in an exaggerated manner. It seemed that her action of flinging his hand away had affected his wound, and he was in so much pain that he looked hideous. When Yun Shirshir saw this, she was so shocked that she immediately got up and went up to him. "What's wrong? Did I hurt you?" I just wanted to use your hand to get some warmth. You're so rough." He complained in an aggrieved manner, which made Yun Shirshir even more regretful. She immediately handed over her hand obediently and coaxed, "I'm sorry. I didn't do it on purpose. Let me hold your hand, okay?" "No." Hua Jin raised his head lazily, looking as if he was unworthy of her status. Yun Shirshir was defeated by him and held his hand without any explanation. His hand was so cold, she didn't know if it was because he had lost too much blood. Chapter 2004. His hands were so cold that there was no warmth at all. She wondered if it was because he had lost too much blood. Hua Jin's eyes flickered. He gently held her hand, and the corners of his lips could not help curling into a satisfied smile. Her hands were so warm. It was a warmth that he was extremely greedy for. Actually, this kind of injury was not painful at all. In the past, he had a few of his ribs broken. That kind of pain was heart-wrenching. However, he could be considered to be lucky. If it had deviated by a few inches and hurt his organs, he would have been in deep trouble. But only God knew that he did not think so much at that time. He only wanted to protect her. He did not see when Mu Wanru had a dagger in her hand. He only knew that she was coming at him aggressively. He quickly pushed Yun Shirshir away. But he did not expect that she would stab him with the dagger. But he did not regret it. Thinking about it, it was still frightening. He did not know where this crazy woman came from. "Who is she?" Hua Jin asked about Mu Wanru. Yun Shirshir did not react at first. She only came back to her senses when he asked, "A thief." "A thief?" Hua Jin did not know whether to laugh or cry. "I saw that she was wearing a patient's gown. She seemed to have escaped from a mental hospital." "Mental hospital?" Yun Shirshir was suddenly alerted when he mentioned it. Mental hospital. She remembered that hospital. It was the most famous mental hospital in the capital. They were very strict with their patients. How did she escape? She did not know why Mu Wanru was in the mental hospital. She thought that Mu Yaja had dealt with her, but the flight from the capital to Sea City took 3 to 4 hours. Putting aside how Mu Wanru escaped from the mental hospital, could she have bought a plane ticket and boarded the plane? Flying from the capital to Sea City? It was a little too laughable. She was so crazy that even the airport would not allow such a dangerous person to book a plane ticket. And that suspicious message. Qin Zhou said that he did not send such a message. Qin Zhou's character was absolutely trustworthy. It was impossible for him to toy with her. With Mu Yajia around, even if he ate a bear's heart and leopard's guts, he would never become a ghost. So what was going on? For a moment, Yun Shishir's mind was in a mess, and she was speechless. Hua Jin saw her silence and thought that she was unwilling to talk about it, so he said, "It's okay if you don't want to talk about it." People always had a past that they didn't want to look back on. Yun Shishir suddenly grabbed his hand. There was something fishy about this. He had to get to the bottom of this. The first person she thought of was Song Enya. The most important person she had ever offended was Song Enya. If the latter was behind this matter, then everything made sense. Song Enya was capable of bringing Mu Wanru out of a mental hospital without anyone noticing and transporting her to Sea City. If he could get rid of her through Mu Wanru, the most optimistic outcome would be that the two thorns in his flesh would perish together. That would be great news for her. Even if she did not die, she would be stained with blood from the current situation. Now that she was suspected of murder, and there was no reasonable evidence to prove her innocence, she did not know if Hua Jin's testimony could save her any leeway. Chapter 2005. However, the disdain on her had not been removed, and she was still on bail pending trial. Yun Shishir was a little worried. If the news were to spread, the media would not know how to publicize this matter. Those unscrupulous reporters who knew how to distort the story. What about Mu Yajia? He had clearly promised to fly to Sea City together, but for some reason, he did not show up. This was probably Song Enya's doing. What a good plan to lure the tiger away from the mountain. The more she thought about it, the more terrified she became. After all, Song Enya had long wanted to get rid of her. Yun Shishir had always been wary of her, but she did not expect her to be so ruthless. Even though they could not be sure if Song Enya was the one behind all this, she was still the prime suspect. Other than her, she could not think of a second person. Still, what was the matter with that text message? She still could not think of a reasonable explanation. Could it be that someone had hacked Qinzhou's phone IP and sent the text message, then quickly erased the data? She had removed something on this level before. If it was a skilled hacker, it would be easy for them to do such a thing. Had it not been reported on the internet before, the more Yun Shishir thought about it, the more her head hurt. She gently knitted her brows, exhausted. She had not slept well last night, and after going through a series of events, she was exhausted. Hua Jin's heart ached when he saw her tired look. He gently caressed her face. "Shishir, do you want to sleep for a while? You don't look good." Yun Shishir shook her head. "I'm not tired. I'll accompany you." She looked up at Hua Jin and smiled. "Today, thank you. If not for you, I really don't know what would have happened." "Why are you thanking me? Any man would have done the same." Hua Jin did not think much of it. He did not think that this was an earth-shattering thing. "I still have to thank you, because you got hurt because of me." Even though Hua Jin appeared nonchalant about it, she still felt very guilty. "If you say that again, I'll get angry." After a pause, Hua Jin smiled gently. "If I had been with you, this wouldn't have happened. I was careless and didn't expect her to have a weapon." "Didn't you think that you might die?" When Hua Jin heard this, he was stunned for a moment, but then he said mockingly, "I'm not even afraid of living. Why would I be afraid of death?" He had experienced a life that was crueler than death. Death was nothing to be afraid of. "What do you mean?" "Nothing." Hua Jin shook his head and didn't say anything else. "Shishir, why are you so stupid? Who would ask you to go to the rooftop in the middle of the night? It's obviously a trap. I can't believe you went there so eagerly. I didn't think that much." Big-chested, but brainless. When Yun Shishir heard this, she immediately became angry. "What did you say?" Hua Jin was amused by her and laughed out loud. "Nothing. I was just joking." "What?" It's not funny at all. Yun Shirshir sulked. Hua Jin immediately begged for mercy. Okay, don't be angry. I said the wrong thing. There was a moment of silence in the ward. Only the beeping sound of the machine could be heard. Yun Shirshir suddenly broke the silence and asked carefully, Actually, what you told me about your background, you weren't joking with me, right? Chapter 2006. Yun Shirshir suddenly asked the question that was bothering her as she looked at him quizzically. Hua Jin was stunned. In an instant, his face turned ashen. Yun Shirshir was at a loss for what to do when she saw his face turn ugly. She did not know what she had said that had stabbed him. It's probably because you're too close to me and something bad will happen. Hua Jin lowered his eyelashes in disappointment. He bit his lip and said, Maybe I'm too selfish and didn't care about this. But he looked up and said seriously, Do you know, I like being with you. A look of surprise appeared in Yun Shirshir's eyes. Don't misunderstand. I don't mean anything else. I said that I like being with you because you give me the warmth of a family. As Hua Jin spoke, he smiled slightly, but his tone was extremely lonely. I'm very greedy for this warmth because this warmth is unprecedented. So, Hua Jin, there was a hint of bitterness in Hua Jin's smile as he said, Seriously, maybe you should keep a distance from me. At least, before I cut ties with that woman. That woman? Could that woman be the sugar daddy behind Hua Jin, that Mushi had mentioned to her before? Hua Jin glanced at Yun Shirshir and saw through her thoughts. He was extremely meticulous, more so than ordinary men. Hence, he quickly realized what Yun Shirshir was suspecting. I know that there are too many rumors about me in the industry. Some are groundless, but some are the truth. Yun Shirshir looked at him with a deep gaze. The background I told you before is all real. It's not a joke, but I'm afraid that if you know about my past, you'll think that I'm dirty. Hua Jin shrunk his shoulders helplessly. His bloodless lips were dry and cracked like the dry earth. How can that be? Yun Shirshir smiled. I don't think you're dirty. The past is the past. Who doesn't have a past? Really? Hua Jin's eyes shone with surprise and joy. In an instant, there was a hint of anger on his face. You really won't find me dirty? Yes. Hua Jin scrutinized her expression. Seeing the sincerity and seriousness in her eyes, he sighed. If you're willing to listen, I'll tell you. All right. The truth was that Hua Jin's father had sold him to a man with an extraordinary background when he was at his wit's end. This man was very powerful and famous in the financial circle. He had invested in many fields, such as the internet, entertainment media, real estate. The entertainment company he controlled was only a small part of his business. The man took a fancy to him and proposed to use him to pay off the debt. Hua Jin's father agreed. The next few years were ones that Hua Jin could not bear to look back on. From being young and ignorant to later being cold and sophisticated, it was all thanks to this man. He still remembered that one time a man took him to attend a huge private banquet. The host of the banquet had booked an entire island for half a month of revelry, young models, drugs, and playing very fiercely. That man threw him into the circle and said that he could play with him however he wanted. During that half a month, he was ravaged beyond recognition. Chapter 2007. It was said that she died on the spot because of her drug addiction. That banquet was filled with extravagance. It was like the wine pools and meat forests of ancient times. Depth bombs, Russian roulette, there was nothing that could not be done. He watched helplessly as a group of women wearing blindfolds formed a circle with their, but sticking out. When the music started, they let the men play with them. Whoever vented first had to drink as punishment. As for the so-called depth bombs, it was even more unbearable to watch. Of course, in their circle, it was not worth mentioning to play with a few young models. It was something that could be settled with a little money. Some of the young models did not know that they played so hard. They regretted it as soon as they stepped in. But since they were here, there was no reason to retreat. They forced themselves on her, and did it forcefully. After that banquet, Hua Jin became addicted to drugs. He spent a few months recuperating. The man did not care about him. In order to make a living, he had to be sent to the bar. Later, the man signed a contract with him and packaged him. He was determined to turn him into a costume idol, probably because he saw him as a money tree, or maybe because he was tired of him. The man did not touch him after that. Half a year after his debut, he met the woman called Xiaoya. In fact, Hua Jin did not know the full name of this woman. He only knew that she had an extraordinary background. He heard that she was related to the Zhang Tan. Her family was prominent, and the group behind her could be said to be an astonishingly powerful family. The appearance of this woman, in a sense, saved him from the dark circle. However, in another sense, he was trapped in a cage like a canary and could not be coveted by anyone. She liked him very much. Hua Jin thought that it was probably his beautiful appearance that attracted her, or maybe it was his sweet words that made her addicted. Until now, any female star who got close to him or wanted to use his fame to create hype had been banned by her. To her, banning was just a matter of a sentence. But for those female celebrities, it was apocalyptic. From then on, any female star who saw him would avoid him as if he was a monster. Even though they were on the same set, she couldn't wait to be separated from him by a galaxy. Hua Jin glanced at her cautiously and gave a self-deprecating laugh. Isn't it funny? I'm like a commodity. To put it bluntly, even I feel that my body is extremely dirty. Don't say that. When Yun Shishir heard this, her mood was extremely complicated. Heartache, shock, heartache, all sorts of emotions welled up in his heart. It turned out that what he said that day was not a joke at all. How he had opened his wound and shown it to her. How he had smiled lightly and said, "I was just joking with you. Will you hate me?" Hua Jin was terrified. He didn't want to say these things. These scars had been compressed for many years and had long festered, but he just wanted to let her know that he was willing to open up his past and show it to her. However, what he was even more afraid of was that after saying all this, what he was met with was her avoidance and avoidance. Yun Shishir shook her head. She sympathized with him, and her heart ached for him. But she didn't think that he was as dirty as he said. The dirtiest thing was no one's heart, wasn't it? Chapter 2008. Have you never thought of leaving this industry? Yes, I have. Hua Jin said honestly. Then why? I can't escape. Hua Jin lowered his head and closed his eyes. He seemed to be disappointed and helpless. I can't escape. How can that be? Yun Shishir did not think so. She stared at Hua Jin's lonely expression and felt sorry for him. She wanted to say something, but Hua Jin cut her off. Shishir, you don't understand this industry at all. It's materialistic and indulgent. Since ancient times, people in our line of work have been called entertainers and have always been reduced to playthings in the hands of the rich and powerful. Otherwise, don't step into this industry. Once you step into it, you can only climb up and there's no way out. That is, unless you have a very powerful financial backer behind you to protect you. But you're different. Acting is your pastime. You don't make a living out of it. Moreover, you have the Mu group behind you. You don't have to worry about anyone attacking you. Hua Jin suddenly smiled, but his eyes were full of bitterness. Sure, do you know how many people I've offended all these years? If I leave this protection, I'll definitely be skinned alive by those people. Originally, I wasn't afraid, but now I want to survive. Yun Shirshir was even more confused. From Hua Jin's explanation, Yun Shirshir could vaguely sense that the backer behind him was very powerful. She also realized that Hua Jin was now in a dangerous situation and was in a dilemma. Other than his backer, no one could protect him. Hua Jin said casually, "Actually, I'm tired of the entertainment industry. I'm tired of the hypocrisy and scheming. I'm also tired of constantly changing my mask to cater to anyone. That's why I'm so envious of you." Yun Shirshir frowned and looked at him. "Do you want to leave the entertainment industry?" "Huh. If you want to leave, I'll think of a way." Hua Jin was stunned. "You'll think of a way?" "Yes, I will think of a way to protect you." Hua Jin was stunned for a long time. Suddenly, he shook his head and said helplessly, "Shirshir, don't joke around. Don't make trouble for yourself." "I've never thought of it as a problem." Yun Shirshir said seriously, "Hua Jin, if you really want to leave, I'll help you." Hua Jin gently nodded. However, he did not really believe that Yun Shirshir had a way to get him out of this circle. However, he accepted her kind intentions. Airport. It was 6 o'clock in the morning when the plane landed. Last night's flight was supposed to take off at 7 o'clock. However, due to the weather, a large number of flights were delayed, and the warning was upgraded to orange. Private jets couldn't even start flights. Generally speaking, private jets couldn't fly whenever they wanted. If they had a flight plan, they had to submit an application to the airport's air traffic control a week in advance, and the flight would take place a week later. Due to the weather and many other dangerous factors, Min Yu's emergency flight was rejected. He couldn't book a first-class ticket. Hence, a certain man who had always traveled first class had to experience life in the economy class. Min Yu suggested that if the flight took off at 2 o'clock in the morning, it would be at least 6 o'clock in the morning when it landed in Sea City. Since that was the case, he might as well wait for Yun Shirshir's flight in the capital. Mu Yaja rejected him coldly. He was worried. Chapter 2009. The plane finally took off at 2:50 a.m. He turned on his phone and received a long text message from Qin Zhou. It was a short and concise report of what had happened. He immediately dialed Qin Zhou's number. The phone rang for a while before it was picked up. Qin Zhou's surprised voice came through the phone. "Boss." Qin Zhou sounded as if he had seen a ghost. He did not expect Mu Yaja to arrive in Sea City overnight. He thought that Mu Yaja would never come to Sea City again. "Boss, why are you in Sea City? Where is she?" She's at the hospital." "Which hospital?" Qin Zhou reported the address. Mu Yaja was about to hang up the phone when Qin Zhou suddenly said anxiously, "Boss, is it convenient for you to come over now? I'm at the police station." "What's wrong?" "Don't worry about Shirshir for now. She only suffered some superficial injuries. I've sent people to take care of her. However, there's a small matter here. I hope you can come over and take care of it." "Take care of it yourself." "I want to, but if I had such authority, why would I bother you?" Mu Yaja frowned and took it seriously. "What is it?" Half an hour later, Mu Yaja appeared at the police station. When Qin Zhou saw him, he immediately stood up excitedly and rushed to him. "Boss, you're here." "Yeah." Mu Yaja looked a little fatigued. He had barely closed his eyes during the entire night's journey. A normal person would not be able to take it. Even with his amazing stamina, he could not withstand this fatigue. The weariness on his face was heart-wrenching. He seemed to have never shown such a tired expression before. Qin Zhou also noticed the tiredness on his face. He was a little surprised. "Boss, you look tired. Do you want to rest for a while? Tell me, what's the matter?" Mu Yaja ignored his kindness and went straight to the point. Chinjo looked at Minyu, who was standing beside him with a complicated expression. He pursed his lips helplessly and said, "Mu Wanru is dead." Mu Wanru? Mu Yaja was stunned for a few seconds. How did she die? Chinjo summarized what had happened that night. Right now, the police are suspecting that Shirshir is Mu Wanru's murderer. Looking at the current situation, all sorts of evidence are against Shirshir's innocence. The evidence collected from the crime scene is also unable to prove her innocence. I've already paid bail, but based on the current situation, I'm afraid I'll be summoned by the police for interrogation at any time. Why is Mu Wanru in Sea City? Minyu questioned. Isn't she being held captive in the hospital? I don't know. Chinjo looked confused. A sharp glint appeared in Mu Yaja's eyes as he asked suspiciously, "Are you sure it's him?" The body was placed in the morgue. Even though the person fell from a high altitude and the body was severely deformed, it was still recognizable. Mu Yaja ordered, "Minyu, send someone to check the situation at the hospital." "Boss, you're saying, how can a lunatic escape from the hospital? Unless, of course, someone let her out." Mu Yaja's face turned frosty. If that was the case, it would be a lot more complicated. Given how crazy Mu Wanru was, how was it possible for her to escape from the mental hospital without a clear mind? Chapter 2010. He did not suspect that Mu Wanru was pretending to be crazy. No one could be that good at acting. Moreover, even if she was pretending to be crazy, she did not have the ability to investigate Yun Shirshir's every move. She even knew her schedule like the back of her hand. The most difficult problem now is that the police may summon Shirshir at any time. She may also face a 24-hour interrogation. "Didn't you pay the bail money? It's useless." Mu Yaja frowned. "It's useless? I've used all the power and connections I can think of, but I don't know why. It's as if they're determined to go against Shirshir. Before we get any evidence, Shirshir is still listed as a suspect." "How's the autopsy?" Before Chinjo could answer, a police officer with the rank of a sergeant suddenly walked out of the interrogation room. Behind him were the hotel manager and a few waiters. He glanced at Mu Yaja, and his gaze tightened. Seeing that he was talking to Chinjo, he questioned sternly, "Who are you? Why are you here?" Minyu, who was standing beside him, saw that he was not friendly and stepped forward to reprimand him. "Who are you?" Mu Yaja stopped him. Minyu understood what he meant and immediately stepped back. The police officer glanced at Minyu and snorted. "Don't think that you can be so presumptuous here, just because you have some power. This is a serious place, so please correct your attitude. And don't show off your strength." He obviously did not know the identity of the man in front of him. If he did, he probably would not be so arrogant. The police officers in the police station who had some experience all spoke with a bit of an accent. When they spoke, they pretended to be pretentious and deliberately mystifying. Mu Yaja said slowly, "I'm Yun Shirshir's husband." "Oh, that's great. You should cooperate with us and take a statement." Then the police officer pointed at Chinjo and asked, "Where is Yun Shirshir? Tell her to come to the police station quickly. We need to ask her some questions." Chinjo frowned, somewhat displeased with his attitude. Mu Yaja continued, "If you have any questions, you can ask me directly." The police officer looked him up and down, then pointed to the interrogation room and ordered, "Go sit there first." Minyu thought to himself, "This officer is really arrogant and unreasonable. I wonder who gave him the right to do so. Aren't you afraid of offending people with your words?" While he was complaining, Mu Yaja had already strode into the interrogation room. He wanted to follow, but was stopped by the police officer. "Wait here." As he spoke, the police officer handed over a few tasks and entered the interrogation room. The two men sat facing each other. Mu Yaja sat elegantly on the chair, with his legs slightly crossed. His aura was like that of an emperor, which made the already small interrogation room seem even more cramped. "What's his name?" "I asked you what your name is." Muyaja glanced at him. "Muyaja," the police officer asked as he registered, "what's your relationship with the suspect?" "Suspect?" Muyaja's cold and indifferent eyes slowly narrowed, emitting a dangerous glint. "The suspect is Yun Shirshir. What's your relationship with her?" "She's not guilty." The police officer was stunned. Chapter 2011. She killed someone. Did you see it with your own eyes? No. Then why did you convict her? She hasn't been convicted yet. She's just a suspect on bail. The police officer spoke again. Whether or not she killed someone, whether or not she's guilty, it's not up to you to decide. She's already been released on bail. According to the rules and regulations of the police station, suspects who have been released on bail have to be summoned by the police at any time. Rules and regulations were rules. However, there was no such thing as being released on bail 1 second and being summoned to the police station the next second for interrogation. Could it be that someone was making things difficult for her? Muyaja sneered. "You're talking to me about rules and regulations? Rules and regulations are rules. No one can defy them. You're a police officer. Who gave you such authority?" The police officer looked up at him and warned, "Mr. Mu, the law is strict. Please cooperate with the investigation." Muyaja's lips curled into a sneer. His gaze fell on the police officer as he casually remarked, "What a good example of the authority of the law." He suddenly lowered his gaze and tugged at his tie gently. He then unbuttoned his sleeves. The evil smile on his lips inexplicably made people feel awe. The police officer looked at him quietly, only to see him suddenly stand up straight, stride forward, and slowly walk in front of him. He raised his leg and kicked the table in front of him. He was insufferably arrogant and had no scruples about his status. The table quickly fell towards the police officer. The police officer was caught off guard and was not prepared at all. He fell to the ground together with the table. His leg was crushed by the table, and he grimaced in pain. The table in the interrogation room was very heavy. An ordinary man would not be able to withstand it when it was on top of a person. Muyaja's face was gloomy. His deep black eyes flashed with a sharp glint. He landed on the person on the ground and put his hands in his trouser pockets. He lifted his leg and suddenly stepped on the table. Under the force, the table fell heavily on his body. "Ah!" the police officer screamed in pain. He felt that his legs were about to break under this kick. "Who allowed you to call my wife a suspect? Who gave you such a right?" "You," the police officer widened his eyes in shock. It was hard to imagine that this man dared to be so presumptuous in the police station. You're assaulting a police officer. Where is the law?" "Law." Muyaja looked down at him coldly. "I don't have much patience, so listen carefully." Muyaja said coldly, "I was the one who killed him. If you have the ability, you can deal with me." Several police officers outside the door heard the commotion and immediately rushed in. When they saw the situation, they were shocked. Qinzhou and Minyu also rushed over. They were shocked when they saw the soul-stirring scene. She didn't know what had made her boss so angry that he actually started a fight in the police station. It had never happened before. "Bastard, what are you trying to do? What kind of place is this? How dare you rebel?" When a police officer saw this, he immediately rushed forward to take him down. Muyaja casually grabbed him and restrained him. How many skills could the people in the police station have? But Muyaja was different. He had trained in the military. Every move he made was from actual combat. These guys could not compare to him. Chapter 2012. About 10 minutes later, In the bureau chief's office, the old bureau chief carefully poured tea and looked at the cold-looking man sitting on the sofa. He was on tenterhooks, fearing that he might have missed something. "It's a misunderstanding. It's really a misunderstanding. My subordinates didn't do their job properly and caused you to be alarmed. I'm really ashamed. No one would believe that the young mistress of the Mu family would sacrifice her bright future for the sake of killing someone who had nothing to do with it. This obviously doesn't make sense." Mu Yaja snorted coldly and ignored the tea that the bureau chief offered him. He said coldly, "Investigate your subordinates properly. In this case, he's like a mad dog biting onto an innocent person. It's obvious that he has received some kind of favor." Yes, I'll definitely investigate this thoroughly. However, I hope you won't take this matter to heart. Chairman Mu, you're such a big shot and magnanimous person. You can't make things difficult for me over such a small matter. If I knew it was you, I wouldn't have dared to make things difficult for you. The office door opened. The old bureau chief thanked him profusely and invited him out. The few police officers standing outside the door looked at each other, and then at the old bureau chief, who was nodding and bowing humbly. They were all frightened. It turned out that this man had such a powerful background that the old bureau chief could lower himself to cater to him. No wonder he had a fierce and threatening aura. It seemed that he was not a simple person. This time, they were blind and had offended someone they shouldn't have. When the old bureau chief saw them, he glared at them fiercely. He turned his head and put on a fawning look again. He rubbed his hands and asked carefully, "Chairman Mu, do you want to stay for a while longer?" "No, I have something to do." Of course. Chairman Mu, you're a busy man. I'm really sorry to have caused you trouble in the midst of your busy schedule. Let me see you out." Forget it. Mu Yaja was annoyed when he saw him. He turned around and called Minyu and Qin Zhou to leave the police station. Finally, the old director wiped the cold sweat on his forehead with a handkerchief and turned around, regaining his dignified appearance. "Who gave you the guts to interrogate this high lord?" A loud shout shook the entire room. Everyone looked at each other and lowered their heads guiltily. "Who is in charge of this case? Stand out." A new police officer stepped forward obediently. "You know who you have offended. Didn't you check his background before the interrogation?" I was just following orders." "On whose orders?" Sheriff Wu, the old bureau chief, narrowed his eyes. "Where is he?" "His leg was injured. He was sent to the hospital. Tell him to look for me later. I have something to ask him." "Understood." In the car, with a frosty expression, Mu Yaja ordered his assistant, "Send someone to the Song's residence to restrain Song Enya. After returning to the capital, investigate the ins and outs of this matter." "Yes, I understand." Minyu observed his expression and asked, "Boss, do you suspect? Other than the Songs, no one else in the capital has such great capabilities. Even if there is, they don't have the motive." He thought about it. Chapter 2013. Come to think of it, her so-called suicide was just to divert his attention. How ruthless! A woman's heart was the most vicious. She was the embodiment of it all. She actually used suicide as a way to attract his attention. Most women would at most be ruthless to others. However, she could even do it to herself. It was truly chilling. Minyu immediately sent people to the hospital and the Song family to capture Song Enya's every move and await her punishment. By the time they reached the hospital, the sky was already slightly cold. Mu Yaja walked to the door of the ward. As soon as he pushed it open, he saw Yun Shirshir lying by the bed, fast asleep. However, even though she was asleep, her hands were still tightly clasped with Hua Jin's. Hua Jin's eyes were originally closed when he was suddenly awakened by Mu Yaja's aggressive movements. He opened his eyes abruptly and saw a tall and handsome man with black hair in a suit appear at the door of the ward. Mu Yaja walked into the ward. His sharp gaze suddenly fell on Yun Shirshir and Hua Jin's tightly clasped hands. His gaze suddenly deepened. It was obvious that he was displeased by their intimacy. Yun Shirshir, however, did not notice it at all. Perhaps she was really tired, so her pajamas were so deep that she did not wake up even though there was a huge commotion. Mu Yaja walked over. Every step he took was mixed with a thunderous aura. Hua Jin could not help but be intimidated by his cold aura. While he was stunned, he saw him standing by the bed with his gaze still fixed on their tightly clasped hands. His gaze was sharp. Hua Jin was shocked by his aura and broke out in a cold sweat. What are you doing? Let go. It was just 2 words, but his tone was commanding and did not allow for any objection. Not only did Hua Jin not let go, but he also tightened his grip on her hand. This man's vicious aura was too terrifying. He was like a lion protecting its territory, aggressive and aggressive. What are you doing? Mu Yaja walked over and grabbed his hand, forcefully pulling it away from Yun Shirshir's. Hua Jin cried out in pain. The strength in his hands was so terrifying that he couldn't struggle at all. In the next second, he saw him trying to pick up Yun Shirshir. In his panic, he shouted, "Don't touch her!" He subconsciously reached out to stop her. Mu Yaja didn't even look at him as he waved his hand away. Scram! Hua Jin was flung to the side. In his violent movements, he accidentally pulled on his wound. His face turned pale from the pain. He clenched his teeth and sucked in a breath of cold air. So painful. The wound had just been stitched up, so it was still very fragile. Mu Yaja waved his hand roughly, but he could clearly feel the wound tearing open. Soon, there was a smear of dark red blood on the gauze, which kept seeping out. Yun Shirshir was startled awake by the argument between the two. She looked up and saw Hua Jin covering his wound, frowning as he fell to the side. She immediately went forward to support him. Just as she got up, she realized that there was a man with a terrifying aura standing beside her. She turned around and saw that it was him. Why is it you? Mu Yaja asked coldly. Why can't it be me? Yun Shirshir looked deeply into his cold eyes, and her tone instantly turned cold. What are you doing here? Those 5 cold words were extremely distant and indifferent. When she thought of him breaking the contract, she was furious. Mu Yaja was slightly angered by those 5 cold words. Chapter 2014. His voice was cold, and the chills seeped into her bones, making her shudder. Yun Shirshir didn't back off. Instead, she looked up and stared back at him coldly. Without any hesitation, she said aggressively, "Why should I want you to come?" Mu Yaja looked at her with a gloomy gaze. "Did I disturb you when I came?" As he said that, his gaze fell on Hua Jin with deep meaning. Thinking about how intimately the two of them were, when he pushed the door open and walked in, he felt an inexplicable anger and frustration. He hated it when she was with other men. Moreover, they were holding hands so intimately. She stayed by the bed, and even though they were asleep, their hands were still tightly intertwined. How could he not be angry? The disgust and suspicion in his eyes pierced Yun Shirshir's heart. At that moment, the wound that had already healed started to bleed again. What was he disgusted with? Disgusted with Hua Jin? Then what was he suspecting? Was he suspecting that she and Hua Jin would be having an affair when he wasn't around? What did he mean by, "Did I disturb you"? Didn't this man sometimes feel that his words were cruel and hurtful? Yun Shirshir was so angry that she was trembling all over. In the end, she couldn't help but laugh out loud. She stood up abruptly and pushed him out of the door, ignoring the abrasions on her hands. Get lost. Muyaja was caught off guard and was pushed hard by her, causing him to stumble backward. When he realized what she had said, he looked up in disbelief and stared at her coldly. However, he sneered angrily. Get lost. Yun Shirshir met his gaze fearlessly, but her voice was chilly. Yes, get lost. I don't want to see you. Qinzhou and Minyu rushed over, but didn't expect to see this scene. Qinzhou and Minyu looked at each other as they stared at each other. Clearly, they did not expect such a situation. Seeing that he was pushed away, the man deeply frowned. Deep, handsome eyes fell on her face. There was scrutiny. There was anger. What do you mean? Muyaja's heart was filled with anger. He grabbed her hand tightly, and his chest was filled with jealousy. You dare to chase me away for a man? His hands were extremely strong. Yun Shirshir was hurt by him all of a sudden. She bit her lip in pain and looked at him with teary eyes, but there was a hint of wanting to say something. What did she mean by chasing him away for a man? Was that the reason? It was simply indescribable. This man's ability to twist people's words was amazing. When Hua Jin saw this, he was also furious. He sat up abruptly and didn't care about the wound on his upper abdomen. He glared at Muyaja and complained, Muyaja, if you're still a man, please don't treat her so roughly. Muyaja glanced at him coldly from the corner of his eye. You have no right to speak here. Why not? Hua Jin didn't know where he got the courage from. His eyes were red as he spoke up for Yun Shirshir. Do you know that Shirshir almost lost her life last night? Muyaja's pupils contracted as he stared at him suspiciously. What do you mean? Hua Jin. Chapter 2015. Yun Shirshir gritted her teeth and stopped him. Hua Jin didn't listen to her and continued, as her man, you should protect her. Trust her. But you can't even protect her. What right do you have to be her man? What right do you have to be angry at her? Shirshir is a good girl. If you don't cherish her, please don't trample on her. Hua Jin, stop talking. Yun Shirshir swatted his hand away, but her heart couldn't help but turn cold. Qinzhou heard this and immediately went forward. Boss, calm down. There's nothing that can't be explained clearly. There's no need to be so angry. Hua Jin gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. He sneered and said, Muyaja, I know that you have great power and influence. As the business tycoon in Beijing, the Mu family is a big business and has a deep-rooted position. If I offend you, you can ban me with just one word. But do you think I'm afraid of you? I'll look down on you instead. If you can't even protect the woman you love, what's the point of having great power and influence? She almost lost her life tonight. Muyaja regained his composure and said coldly, what do you mean by that? I don't know. I only know that last night, Shirshir was tricked by a text message to go to the rooftop on the 28th floor. In the end, a crazy woman came out of nowhere and wanted to kill her. Do you know that the woman dragged her down from the 28th floor? If it weren't for Shirshir's quick reflexes to grab hold of the pipe hanging outside the building, perhaps what you're seeing now is just a cold corpse. Muyaja was slightly stunned. Perhaps what you're seeing now is just a cold corpse. These words really shocked him. Yun Shirshir held her hand that was hurting from his grip and stood aside. She turned her face away and didn't make a sound, but her face was already wet with tears. She had never thought of complaining about Muyaja breaking his promise last night. But when she saw the suspicion in his eyes, her heart turned cold. She was frightened. After all, she was a woman. When she saw him, she hoped that he would hold her in his arms and comfort her gently. But not only did that not happen, he even doubted her. Could it be that she still needed to painstakingly explain to him? There's no need for that. If they trusted him, why would they doubt him? If he had doubts, there was no need to explain. He didn't trust her enough. Yun Shirshir firmly believed in this conclusion. Is what he said true? Muyaja asked her. When he was at the police station, he didn't know about this at all. Even Qin Zhou didn't know this detail. He only knew that Yun Shirshir was in danger, but he didn't know that she was only one step away from death. Yun Shirshir's lips curled into a cold smirk as she slowly looked at him and casually asked, "Does it matter to you whether it's true or not?" How could it not be important? He had almost lost her. How could it not be important? Muyaja knew that the woman in front of him was angry with him. It was probably because he didn't attend the award ceremony with her last night. Therefore, she was angry. She was angry that he had failed to keep his promise. As he thought of this, he felt that it was reasonable for this little thing to be a little emotional. Chapter 2016. Thus, he tugged on her sleeve and lowered his noble head. His pair of clear and cold eyes floated with a hint of apology, as if he was taking a step back. He lowered his voice and said, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have stood you up. I shouldn't have put you in such a dangerous situation. Do you think I need your apology? If it was any other day, this little woman would definitely be amused by his helpless appearance and laugh." However, Yun Shirshir was not moved at all when she heard his apology. In fact, the coldness in her eyes was so gloomy that it was about to stab him. Is an apology enough? Is an apology enough to make up for everything? Muyaja asked in a low voice. "What do you want?" "What do I want?" Yun Shirshir stared at him with widened eyes. She was so angry that she laughed. "Muyaja, why do you have to be so arrogant even when you're apologizing?" Muyaja was speechless for a moment. This woman was so eloquent. He was not good at expressing himself, let alone sweet-talking her. Hence, he could not refute her. He clearly did not mean it that way. So, did she have to twist his words so much? Muyaja was at a loss for words. Yun Shirshir sized him up. Her eyes regained their calm as she said coldly, "Attending the film festival with me is probably not as important as Song Enya, right?" He did not know if she was deliberately trying to provoke him or if she was really trying to guess him. However, just as he was about to deny it, Muyaja suddenly reacted to her words and was stunned. How did she know that he had stood her up because of Song Enya? For a moment, his eyes were filled with doubts. "What do you mean? What do you mean?" "I mean it literally. Don't you understand?" How did she know? How did she know about Song Enya? Muyaja suddenly realized something. Could it be that Song Enya had told her, or was she deliberately using this matter to provoke her? ***. Yun Shirshir sneered and said expressionlessly, "You didn't pick up the phone because you were afraid that I would be angry if I found out, right?" Muyaja was silent for a long time before he admitted bluntly, "Yes." Yun Shirshir did not know whether to laugh or cry at his affirmation. She sucked in a deep breath of cold air as her eyes turned moist. He clearly knew that she would be angry if she heard about this matter. However, he still went to the film festival without hesitation. She left him behind to accompany Song Enya. For the time being, she would not speculate on the reason behind it. Was it like what Song Enya had said, or was there another reason? The fact that he had abandoned his promise with her and went to Song Enya's side was an undeniable fact. How ridiculous! Yun Shirshir gritted her teeth and suppressed the bitterness in her heart. Every word she uttered was shaky. "If you're really afraid that I'll be angry, then why did you do it? You clearly know how much I hate her. But one phone call from her, and you still went. You went without a care for anything. You even canceled your promise with me and didn't even give me a reply. I was so worried that something had happened to you. In the end, I didn't expect you to break our promise because of Song Enya. What am I? Muyaja, what am I? Don't tell me you don't care about your agreement with me at all? No. Then what is it? Tell me. Answer me. She was so aggressive that he had no way to retreat. Chapter 2017. Huh. Yun Shirshir burst out laughing. Am I being unreasonable? Oh, so that's how it is. How did you find out about this? Muyaja asked in a deep voice. Yun Shirshir chuckled when she heard that. So, you're still trying to hide it from me. It's not what you think. A look of fatigue appeared in Muyaja's eyes. He shut them tightly and said weakly, don't let your imagination run wild. Since you've already done it, why are you afraid that I'll let my imagination run wild? What did I do? Muyaja felt that she was a little unreasonable. He clearly did not do anything, yet he was being questioned like this. He really felt that he could not defend himself. Yun Shirshir said coldly, the second before I registered, Song Enya called and flaunted her power to me. What is this? Is this a provocation? Now, you're acting all innocent. Who are you trying to put on an act for? Song Enya called me? Muyaja's brows sank. Without thinking, he knew that Song Enya had called Yun Shirshir and said something nasty. She was probably using this opportunity to drive a wedge between them. However, he really did not expect this. He thought that Song Enya had really slit her wrist and went to the hospital to visit her out of goodwill. He did not expect that she had deliberately hurt herself to gain his sympathy and pity. Her motive was terrible. However, she said that he was putting on an act. Muyaja's face sank at once. No one had ever dared to say such things in front of him. She was the first. Back then, Jiang Qiming had repeatedly pleaded with him, so he felt a little sorry for Song Enya. He thought that the latter was really seeking death, so he pushed back his flight in the afternoon and rushed to the hospital to take a look before flying directly to Sea City. Back then, when he called Qin Zhou and instructed him to fly to Sea City with Yun Shirshir, it was to ensure her safety. However, Qin Zhou misunderstood him. He thought that he was not going, so he told Yun Shirshir the same thing. But in reality, it wasn't that he wasn't going. He had merely pushed back his flight and planned to book a flight to Sea City immediately after visiting his niece. However, there were two accidents. One exception was Song Enya. The other one was that the plane tickets had been booked and the next flight was at 7 p.m. However, he knew that the flight would be delayed, so there was no need for him to make the trip. Minyu also tried to persuade him. Perhaps by the time he arrived, it would already be early in the morning. So, there was no point in going to Sea City. He missed her, and was afraid that she would be disappointed. So he still insisted on flying over. The reason why he didn't pick up her call was because he was in a hurry to go to the hospital and didn't bring his phone with him. When he returned to the company and saw the missed calls, he didn't know how to explain it. So he didn't reply immediately. He didn't know how to lie. He didn't know how to flatter. And he didn't know how to smooth things over. However, if he were to tell the truth directly over the phone, he felt that it was inappropriate. He was afraid that she would let her imagination run wild and suspect something. She was extremely sensitive and would easily let her imagination run wild. He was afraid that she would think too much, so he didn't pick up the call. Hence, he thought that he might as well not say anything over the phone. If she asked about it when they arrived in Sea City, he could explain it clearly in person. What happened next, though? Chapter 2018. Little did he know that right after he left the hospital, Song Enya had made a provocative call to Yun Shirshir in high spirits. He did not know what she had said over the phone, but it was nothing more than that to sow discord between them. As for what happened later, he did not have the ability to predict the future, so he could not foresee anything that would happen in the next second. How could he have imagined that Song Enya would be so ruthless as to go all out to get rid of Yun Shirshir? Since she dared to mess around right under his nose, he would not be soft-hearted. Song Enya's side was easy to deal with. However, this woman used this to stop him. What could happen between him and Song Enya? Song Enya was related to him by blood. She was his cousin. According to seniority, she was his niece. He had to be crazy to have any thoughts about Song Enya. Before Yun Shirshir appeared, he had been getting along with her rather harmoniously. However, some things that happened later made him extremely disappointed in Song Enya. Hence, they gradually drifted apart. However, it was impossible for him to say that he did not have any feelings for a sister that he had doted on since she was young. Compared to more than 10 years of friendship, she was his most beloved sister. If it were not for Song Enya, he would not have been able to walk out of the trauma of losing his mother. He still had to care about this bit of friendship. He was a cold man to the core, but most of the time, he was not so heartless. However, it was precisely this compassion that was used by the other party. He admitted defeat and felt that he was a good-for-nothing to have been set up in such a way. He was really a good-for-nothing. He was indignant, helpless, and a little angry. The last bit of affection he had for Song Enya was completely gone. However, he was indignant that she would judge him like this. Do you really understand the meaning of putting yourself in someone else's shoes? Can you give me a reasonable explanation? She's in the hospital. Muyaja forced himself to calm down and replied calmly. Her mother knelt down and begged me to see her. What happened to her? She cut her wrist. Cut her wrist. Yun Shirshir smiled. You believe her? Muyaja was silent for a moment. So, you broke your promise with me for Song Enya. Muyaja was completely speechless. Even a few words of explanation seemed powerless. He suddenly turned around and furrowed his brows tiredly. He looked at her deeply and said nothing as he strode out of the ward. Boss, Chairman Mu? Qin Zhou and Minyu looked at each other as they watched him leave. Minyu patted Qin Zhou's shoulder gently and instructed, I'll go check on the boss first. I'll leave young madam to you. Take good care of her. Okay. Minyu immediately chased after Muyaja and left. Yun Shirshir watched as Muyaja left. As if she had lost all her strength, she fell on the bed in a daze. Her eyes were blank and her shoulders drooped helplessly. She reached out her hands and slowly held her face as she sobbed silently. Seeing this, Qin Zhou could not bear to see her like this. As a bystander, it was difficult for him to judge who was at fault in this matter. However, at the end of the day, the two cared too much about each other and loved each other to the core. It was just that some things still needed to be worn in and could not be explained clearly. Chapter 2019. However, Huajin beat him to it. He sat beside her and hugged her shoulders gently. Don't cry. His heart ached when he saw her crying. He felt indignant on her behalf. How could there be a man as arrogant as Muyaja in this world? He was insufferably arrogant and looked down on everyone else. Huajin hugged her, not caring that such an action would affect his wound. Even though it was painful and itchy, making his scalp tingle at this moment compared to her tears, it seemed that all of this was not worth mentioning. He didn't like her tears. Such a pair of beautiful eyes should be more beautiful when she smiled. But now they were red and swollen from crying. They were not beautiful at all. Huajin said half-jokingly, half-seriously, Sure, don't cry. If you keep crying, I'll cry too. Before he could finish his sentence, a line of warm tears rolled down from his eyes. Yun Shirshir remained motionless. She held her face as if she couldn't hear any of his comforting words. She couldn't stop her tears, and they fell down in streams. Hua Jin didn't know how to comfort her. He could only hold her helplessly and pull her into his arms. He allowed her hot tears to burn his chest. In the car, Minyu sat carefully at the side. Mu Yaja propped up his chin with one hand as he looked coldly out of the window. Even though he was quiet and did not say a word, his domineering aura made the atmosphere in the car taut like a bowstring, ready to explode at any moment. Actually, Minyu really wanted to ask what his plan was. Was he going to return to the capital immediately or stay in Sea City for a few days? Looking at Yun Shirshir's condition and Hua Jin's injury, he was afraid that they wouldn't be able to leave in a day or two. However, there were some things that he had to deal with in the capital. Also, Minyu also felt that if his boss left without saying a word, young Madam would be sad. Women were the most delicate and sensitive. A woman like young Madam was very easy to coax. With a few sweet words, she would probably not be so stubborn. Although he didn't have a wife, he had dated 1 or 2 women. It was hard to guess a woman's thoughts, but it was easy to coax her. Someone like young Madam was not particularly willful and unruly. She was considerate and gentle. She would lower herself to coax her a little, and then stop when she was ahead. Furthermore, I don't know if I should say that. Minyu thought that if he were the young Madam, he would be angry too. However, with the boss's arrogant and insufferably arrogant personality, it was rare for him to lower himself to apologize. Saying sorry was already not easy. However, when coaxing a woman, patience was the most important thing. In the end, sigh. It was a long story. Even he was anxious when he saw it. Boss, Minyu thought about it and decided to ask about it. Seeing that Mu Yaja was still looking out the window, he asked carefully about young Madam. She needs to calm down. Mu Yaja said expressionlessly, let her calm down for a while. Minyu wanted to say that women didn't need to calm down. He wasn't like a man who could quickly calm down when something happened. The more they ignored her, the more problems there would be. However, he couldn't blame his boss. His boss didn't know how to coax a woman at all. This was the problem. Chapter 2020. Is he having a cold war with me? His assistant was worried sick about this matter. Boss, you don't have the demeanor of a man in this matter. It's reasonable for young Madam to be angry. Upon hearing that, Mu Yaja shot him a cold glance from the corner of his eye. He stared at the man like a predator eyeing its prey. What did you say? His cold words suppressed the indignation in his assistant's heart. He thought with teary eyes, young Madam is the boss's first love. It's bad enough that he doesn't know how to coax a woman, but he's not humble enough to learn from her. Bad review. Tell me, how should I coax her? Mu Yaja asked calmly. She's in a fit of anger now. Every word she says is as sharp as a knife. That's because the boss didn't handle the matter well. You can't blame anyone. Mu Yaja's eyes turned colder as soon as he said that. The assistant obediently shut his mouth and blinked at him innocently. Are you lecturing me? No, I wouldn't dare. Someone who doesn't even have a wife has no right to say that. His assistant expressed enviously and pitifully. If I have a wife, I'll treat her like a treasure. I won't talk back to her, no matter what she says. Mu Yaja closed his eyes and leaned his head gently on the pillow. I just feel helpless. I don't know what to do with her. Coax her, lie to her, hug her in your arms, and coax her gently like a child. Before he could finish his sentence, Minyu's phone suddenly rang. He apologized and picked up the call, only to hear a nervous voice from the other end. Song Enya is missing. What? His voice rose as he asked, incredulously, what's going on? The person on the other end reported, there's no one in the hospital. She went missing last night, and her whereabouts are unknown. The Songs are also very anxious. They can't find her. We're sending people to investigate, but there's still no news. How is that possible? Where could she have gone? I don't know. Continue to investigate until you find her. Yes. After hanging up the phone, Muyaja asked suspiciously, "What's missing?" He vaguely heard these two words. "Boss, we've received news that Song Enya has gone missing. She's nowhere to be found in the hospital, and the Songs are frantically searching for her." "He's missing?" Muyaja furrowed his brows, and a layer of ice formed on his face. "Yes." After a pause, he continued, "Although I don't have any evidence to prove it, I suspect that Song Enya has something to do with Mu Wanru's matter. I've already sent someone to the hospital to inquire about Mu Wanru. Maybe we can find out something." Muyaja was increasingly certain that Song Enya had gone missing due to a guilty conscience or some other unspeakable reason. However, a person would never disappear for no reason. There would always be some clues. He said, "Book a flight back to the capital." "Then what about young madam? Send someone to guard it." "Yes." Minyu immediately sent someone to book the flight tickets. The car sped away. On the other end, Qinzhou was stunned when he received the news that Muyaja had booked a flight back to the capital. Yun Shishir's heart sank to the bottom when she learned that Muyaja had returned to the capital without telling her. Her manager's words woke her up. Chapter 2021. What? Her eyes widened in shock as she looked at her manager with a taut face. Song Enya had gone missing. What happened? The manager shook his head in bewilderment, clearly clueless about the matter. Nothing. Chairman Mu's assistant only mentioned it over the phone. He probably rushed back to the capital to deal with this matter. Song Enya is missing. Where could she have gone? Yun Shishir bit her lower lip, not knowing what Song Enya was up to this time. Didn't she slit her wrist? Why didn't he stay in the hospital? Why did he go missing? Shishir, don't be too upset. It's not convenient for me to say just now, but actually, you've overinterpreted Chairman Mu's words. Yun Shishir looked up. After Muyaja's incident, her manager had been quietly accompanying her by her side. He did not say anything and just kept comforting her. It was only when she had calmed down that he decided to make his stance clear. Yun Shishir did not understand what he was trying to say, though. Overinterpreted. From the standpoint of a bystander, he explained his stance. Actually, it's not about trust or distrust. It's just that no man will be indifferent to seeing his woman being so intimate with another man. Intimate. Yun Shishir smiled faintly, feeling a little speechless. She slowly glanced at Hua Jin, who was leaning against the hospital bed, and her face darkened. Hua Jin got injured because of me. I must stay by his side and take care of him until he recovers. Does Chairman Mu know about this, though? What he saw was only the intimacy between you and Hua Jin. He cares so much about you and is so possessive of you. How could he not let his imagination run wild? Yun Shishir kept quiet for a while, then lowered her head and fell into deep thought. Her manager smiled. Actually, Chairman Mu can be a little childish sometimes. He's very stubborn and even a little possessive when it comes to relationships. He has a strong desire to control them. Perhaps this was related to the environment he grew up in. When he was young, he was different from other boys. From the moment he was born, he was doted on. Moreover, he was destined to be the successor of the Mu group in the future. Therefore, the Mu family cultivated him according to the path of the successor. This was why he had an extremely domineering side and was very stubborn. But what made him outstanding was that he was different from those rich kids. He was single-minded when it came to relationships, and he cared a lot about relationships. On the surface, he was cold to the bone, but in fact, there were times when his heart was very soft. No matter how bad Song Enya is, Chairman Mu still has some feelings for her. Out of consideration for you, he no longer keeps in touch with her. However, given the many years of friendship between the two families, there are some things that he has to give some face to. I heard that Song Enya's mother had knelt down and begged for mercy in front of Mr. Mu, so he had to make a trip there for her sake. Yun Shusher bit her lip. She admitted it. A large part of the reason why she was so angry with him was that he had promised to attend the awards ceremony with her. Her high expectations had vanished into thin air, and he had dismissed her without a word. She felt very disappointed. Chapter 2022. But why didn't he explain anything to me? How should I explain it to you? Just explain it directly. There's no need to be so secretive. Women. Chinjo raised an eyebrow, shook his head, and sighed. Chairman Mu won't be hypocritical, but he's probably afraid that you'll overthink things and won't listen to his explanation. He probably wants to talk to you face to face, so he rushed to see City overnight. If I were a woman, I'd be touched to death. Yun Shusher glanced at him. Sensing her suspicious gaze, Chinjo immediately cleared his name. Don't look at me like that. I'm innocent. I'm not on his side and have no intention of speaking up for him. But the moment he entered the ward, he was eyeing Hua Jin covetously, as if he wanted to eat him up. He's a man. Have you ever seen lions fighting for territory? Yun Shusher was stunned. He could even use such a metaphor. Actually, men are very territorial by nature, especially when it comes to their own private property. This can only mean that in Chairman Mu's heart, you're not to be tarnished by anyone. He cares too much about you because he doesn't want to. His concern makes him confused. Women fight for affection, so why can't men do the same? Was he jealous? Mu Yaja was actually jealous? Qin Zhou glanced at Yun Shusher, who was flustered in the wind, and smiled helplessly. Why? Do you really think that he's suspicious of you? He's just jealous. Chairman Mu is actually very insecure. The more determined he is to get something, the more afraid he is of losing it. Despite Qin Zhou's words, Yun Shusher did not feel relieved at all. Leaning against the bed, Hua Jin seemed to understand a little. In reality, he could tell that Mu Yaja was so angry because of jealousy. Men would be jealous, but they would not show it on their faces because of their pride. Yun Shusher suddenly thought of something. What was his relationship with Song Enya in the past? Were they very close? Yes, very close. You can say that they were as close as siblings. As close as siblings. No wonder. Song Enya's strong possessiveness toward Mu Yaja was probably because she had always been pampered and protected by him. However, one day, the woman that this man loved the most was not hers. This created a huge psychological gap in her heart. Perhaps her dependence and indulgence on Mu Yaja had caused her to develop a sibling relationship with him. Even though this feeling was very twisted and morbid, Song Enya still fell into it and refused to wake up. Their relationship is so good. There was an indescribable sourness in his heart. Even though she knew that Mu Yaja doted on Song Enya so much, it was not out of love. But he still felt jealous. Qin Zhou pondered for a moment. Yes, I don't know much about the details. I only know that Song Enya looks very similar to his mother. Mother? Yes. Qin Zhou nodded. Chapter 2023. Yun Shusher nodded. He loves his mother very much and misses her very much. Yes, that's why it's hard for him to be ruthless toward his niece. She's probably taking advantage of that. He continued. He and his mother have been relying on each other in the family since he was young. Didn't the Mu Group name a property some time ago? Yun Shan Shi, where Yun and Shi come from your name, while Shan and Yi are probably named to commemorate Jiang Yishan. Yun Shusher reacted abruptly. Yun shan shi, yun shan shi. So that was the meaning behind the name. Her manager casually said, "You and Jiang Yishan are probably the two most important women in Mr. Mu's heart and even in his life. Is that true?" "Yes. Yun shan shi means a lot to Mr. Mu. The fact that he named it after you is enough to show how important you are to him. Mr. Mu has never been good with words and doesn't know how to sweet-talk you, but his feelings for you have always been there." Yun Shirshir was stunned, the most important woman in his life. This, however, shook her heart. Suddenly, she did not hate him as much as before. Her manager continued. Song Enya's mother, Jiang Qiming, married Song Zhenghua and raised a son and 2 daughters. Even so, she doesn't have much status in the Song family. Song Enya, on the other hand, has been spoiled by Song Zhenghua. She's very unruly, and I don't like her. I always feel that she's too much for being spoiled. Yun Shirshir was speechless. Song Enya is at most the daughter of a mayor. She always thinks of herself as a princess. The Song family isn't that simple, Qin Zhou added. Do you know the identity of Song Enya's grandfather? He asked, pretending to be mysterious. I know a little. He seems to be someone with a lot of power. He explained, the Song family's power can't be underestimated at all. Song Enya's grandfather was one of the country's founding fathers and had a great reputation. Although he was getting on in years, the Song family's status was still there. After so many years, their power had long been deeply rooted, and they had close ties with many big families. The reason why Song Enya can't do anything to you is that her family is wary of Chairman Mu. But without the protection of Chairman Mu, I can crush you with one finger. It was so terrifying. Hua Jin frowned. He seemed to have some impression of the Song family. He had heard Xiaoya mention the Song family before. It seemed that her family had a close relationship with the Songs, and she was quite familiar with Song Enya. Qin Zhou said, the interests involved in the Song family and the Mu family are far more complicated than you think. Because of you, Chairman Mu and the Song family fell out very badly. Because of this, the entire Mu family was quite dissatisfied. This was also one of the reasons why the Mu family did not approve of you. But with Chairman Mu around, those people can't do anything to you. Thank you, Qin Zhou. I know. Maybe I did go a little overboard with what I said to him earlier. I'm not saying that you went overboard. I'm just saying that you shouldn't read too much into Chairman Mu's words. He can be very stubborn at times. He may not be as meticulous as you when it comes to matters of the heart, but everyone can see his feelings for you. Yun Shirshir nodded. Chapter 2024. Qin Zhou said coldly, Hua Jin, didn't I remind you not to get into an argument with President Mu? How dare you say those things in front of him? Be careful, you can't even protect yourself. Hua Jin bit his lip and said, I'm not afraid that he will do anything to me. I'm just worried that he will not treat Shirshir well. All right, both of you, don't let your imagination run wild. Hua Jin, you stay in the hospital and rest well. Shirshir will come back to the capital with me. No, I want to stay in the hospital and take care of Hua Jin. I will arrange for someone to take care of Hua Jin. Yun Shirshir was still stubborn. You may not be considerate enough to arrange for someone to take care of him. I will take care of Hua Jin. Qin Zhou sighed helplessly. All right, when Hua Jin recovers, let's go back to the capital together. Yun Shirshir's cell phone was broken. The police took it back as evidence, but it was difficult to repair. Hence, Qin Zhou spent some effort to get her a new cell phone. She called Yu and told him that something had happened in Sea City, and that she would be back a few days later. Yu was very worried and asked her what happened. Yun Shirshir was afraid that he would be worried. So she said that something had happened at work and that she needed to stay in Sea City for a few more days. She hung up the phone. Yu's face turned cold. Mommy was lying again. She must be afraid that he would be worried, so she lied to him. In fact, the next day after Mu Wanru's incident, the media reported that someone had committed suicide by jumping off a building at the hotel. Yu had been following the film festival closely. When he saw the news, he immediately realized that his mother was staying at the hotel. After some investigation, Yu also found out that the person who had committed suicide was Mu Wanru. Why was Mu Wanru in Sea City? Wasn't she locked up in a mental hospital? What on earth had happened to her? Yu was very sensitive and immediately connected her to her mommy. He made many calls, but no one picked up. She called her father, but Mu Yaja's phone was turned off because he was on the plane. It was not until Yun Shirshir's phone call that the little boy was convinced that his mommy probably had something to do with this matter. As for this case, the Mu family sent someone to handle it. Naturally, the suspicion on Yun Shirshir was dismissed. This piece of news only appeared for a short period of time before it was quickly replaced by other news. Needless to say, it must be the work of Huanyu's public relations team. Even the slightest bit of negative news was not allowed to appear in front of the public. Although Yun Shirshir was innocent, once she was involved in such news, it was inevitable that the public would overinterpret it. Therefore, Huanyu was in a mess. It could be said that they were in a terrible fix because of this matter. On the second day after the film festival ended, the media published articles that pointed to the dark secrets behind Lin Ji's Best Actress Award. The Best Actress Award that originally belonged to Yun Shirshir was intercepted halfway by Lin Ji. Yun Shirshir did not care. But who was Qinzhou? How could he let it go so easily? Even if he lost the Best Actress Award, he would use the articles to trample on Lin Ji. Lin Ji dared to touch Yun Shirshir's crooked brain. Huanyu was not to be trifled with. They would not stop until she was splashed with ink. Lin Ji's team quickly responded to this matter with a statement. They tried their best to prove their innocence. Chapter 2025. This incident eventually alarmed the Golden Eagle Festival officials, who came forward to admit that there was a mistake in the awards ceremony. Due to a statistical error during the voting, there was a dispute among the judges, which resulted in the wrong award being given out. Lin Ji's side was slapped hard in the face and was extremely embarrassed. The follow-up of the matter was that Lin Ji's side issued a letter of apology, and the public relations team said that because of the official mistake, they were willing to respect the wishes of the officials and give the award to Yun Shirshir. Give. Huanyu's side immediately expressed their stance. We don't care. Even without the Best Actress Award, Yun Shirshir's ability was obvious to all. The audience's recognition was the highest praise, and no number of awards could compare to it. This battle had been fought beautifully. The fans were especially contemptuous of Lin Ji's side's behavior and boycotted. Of course, this was all for later. After Mu Yaja returned to the capital, the plane had just landed when news came again that after Song Enya went missing, they kept a close eye on the Song family's every move, seemingly trying to find clues. However, the news they received was that even the Song family did not know where Song Enya had gone. The Song family was in a frenzy, and they used their connections to find Song Enya's whereabouts. Jiang Qiming was in tears. Not long after she left, news came from the hospital that Song Enya had disappeared after leaving the hospital. When she left, she was wearing a hospital gown, and no one knew where she had gone. After checking the surveillance footage, it showed that after leaving the hospital, she got into a taxi. However, according to the taxi's license plate, they could not find any clues when they reached Huigua Road. Mu Yaja sent people to investigate the latest news. Song Enya booked a plane ticket and flew to San Francisco overnight. She actually went abroad. Went abroad. Why did she go abroad instead of staying in the hospital? Did she have a guilty conscience? Could it be that she was afraid that he would pursue the matter? So she went abroad overnight? Mu Yaja guessed. Jiang Qiming found him and begged him in every possible way, hoping that he would use his power to find Song Enya's whereabouts as soon as possible. Mu Yaja snorted and said that he wanted to find her more than anyone else. After all, he still owed him an explanation regarding Yun Shishir's matter. She had to be held accountable for this matter. Jiang Qiming was baffled. She clearly had no idea what Song Enya had done behind her back. Mu Yaja couldn't be bothered with her. After this incident, coupled with Song Enya's vile behavior, he decided that his relationship with the Songs would end here. Don't worry, I will definitely send people to find your daughter. Mu Yaja only left this sentence for her to digest on her own. Jiang Qiming trembled with fear when she heard that. She glanced at Mu Yaja's expression and saw that it was very ugly. She did not know what her daughter had done to make him so angry. On the other side, at Sea City Hospital, under Yun Shishir's meticulous care, Hua Jin's injuries gradually improved. Hua Jin had never received such meticulous care. Yun Shishir accompanied him through the night. When he was thirsty, she would immediately serve him tea. When he was hungry, she did not feel tired and borrowed the hospital's kitchen to make fish soup for him, saying that it would help his wounds heal. Hua Jin was so touched that he could die. No one had ever been so nice to him. Even if there was, it was for selfish reasons. Chapter 2026. His wounds healed very quickly. A week had passed, and the stitches could be removed. However, he was not willing to let his wounds heal so quickly. He actually enjoyed the time when she was taking care of him in the hospital. Although it was short, it was very heartwarming. However, just as he was about to be discharged, Ji Yuqi suddenly appeared. There was another woman who appeared with her. At the door of the ward, Hua Jin was stunned to see Xiaoya suddenly appear in front of him. The smile on his face froze for a moment. Xiaoya, why did she come to Sea City all of a sudden? Didn't they say that she was studying in Japan and would not be able to return for a short period of time? But now she appeared in the hospital without any precaution. Hua Jin pursed his lips. Suddenly, he felt a little flustered. Yun Shishir, who was feeding him porridge, followed his gaze and saw a woman dressed elegantly at the door of the ward. She was also stunned for a moment. It was a young woman wearing a fur coat. She was tall and slender, and her every movement was graceful and graceful. Just like her name, she was noble and threatening. It was Lin Shuya. She had beautiful makeup on her face. Her delicate eyebrows, seductive eyeliner, snow-white porcelain skin, and red lips were especially charming. Even though they were a few meters away, they could still smell the perfume on her. Mysterious and charming. At a glance, Yun Shishir noticed a tiny beauty mark on the tip of her nose. It did not make her look any less beautiful, and instead added to her charm. She was a very beautiful woman. She could not think of any adjectives to describe this woman. If she had to describe her, she was like a rose with thorns. Red and beautiful, but extremely prickly when touched. However, from the cold expression on her face, it seemed that she did not come with good intentions. Yun Shishir looked at Hua Jin doubtfully. When she looked back, she saw that this woman was looking at her with a pair of sharp eyes. Her eyes were not sharp, but she could see the strong unfriendliness in them. It was as if she had invaded her territory and was chasing her away with her eyes. Lin Shuya slowly walked into the ward in her high heels. The crisp sound of her heels hitting the floor was extremely ear-piercing as they knocked on Hua Jin's heart. Xiaoya, why are you here? Why can't I come? Lin, Shuya smiled coldly and glanced at Yun Shirshir. Then she retracted her gaze and did not look at her anymore. The exquisite makeup on her face, especially those deep eyebrows, coupled with the extremely cold smile on her face, made people shudder for some reason. Her beauty was extremely ostentatious and aggressive. Song Enya's elegance and nobility paled in comparison to her. Her nobility was emitted from her bones. She was a natural-born aristocrat. It could be seen that only people of high birth could have such a temperament. Hua Jin pursed his lips awkwardly. I thought you were still in Japan. Why didn't you tell me that you were injured? Lin Shuya walked over and stopped by the bedside. She lowered her head and looked down at Yun Shirshir, her red lips parting slightly. This is my seat. Yun Shirshir was stunned. Get out of my way. She gave the order without any courtesy. She was like a high and mighty princess, showing off her nobility. Yun Shirshir smiled. He's hungry. I'm feeding him porridge. It's not your turn to talk to me. Chapter 2027. Yuchi, who is she? Yun Shirshir. She's in the same crew as Hua Jin. Oh, she's an actress. Lin Shuya smiled. For some reason, the words that came out of her mouth were extremely contemptuous, as if being an actress was a lowly profession. Yun Shirshir was instantly displeased. This person's words were sarcastic and had a sense of superiority that came from her bones. She was about to flare up when Hua Jin immediately said, Xiaoya, don't be like this. What about me? Lin Shuya frowned slightly, and her tone was full of anger. Were you with this woman when I wasn't in the country? There was an accident at the film festival. She was the one who took care of me these few days. Hua Jin explained. Lin Shuya took another look at Yun Shirshir. However, this time there was a hint of scrutiny in her eyes. Suddenly, she raised her hand and mercilessly knocked the bowl in Yun Shirshir's hand to the ground. The bowl shattered on the ground, and the porridge spilled all over the floor. Yun Shirshir stood up in shock. Some porridge spilled out from the overturned bowl and stained her body. This bowl of nutritious porridge had just been cooked. She had borrowed the kitchen of the hospital and cooked it for an hour. It was still a little hot. She immediately patted it away. However, she heard Lin Shuya say slowly, I'll get someone to cook it for you later. Hua Jin was a little angry. He looked at Lin Shuya angrily and said, What are you doing? I don't like it when you eat porridge cooked by another woman. It's disgusting. Lin Shuya paused and looked a little unhappy. Also, what do you mean by that tone of yours? Are you blaming me? He had never spoken to her like this before. He had always been gentle and soft. But now, because of another woman, he was glaring at her. Lin Shuya was very unhappy. Yun Shirshir stood up and looked at Lin Shuya. She tried to suppress her anger and smiled coldly. Miss, didn't anyone teach you manners when you were young? What you're doing is very rude. Lin Shuya was stunned for half a second. She looked at her deeply, with surprise and anger in her eyes. You, Shirshir. Ji Yuchi quickly walked over and said, Aren't you in a hurry to return to the capital? I'll book a plane ticket for you. Miss Shuya will take care of Hua Jin. You don't have to worry. With that said, she took her hand and pulled her out of the door. Yun Shirshir could not react in time as she was dragged to the door. Stop. Lin Shuya her. Yun Shirshir was not one to be taken advantage of, though. She turned around and met the other's gaze without fear. What? I didn't hear you. You. Hua Jin tugged at her sleeve. Lin Shuya waved it away expressionlessly. Yun Shirshir was even more indignant at this, but she maintained her elegant demeanor and coldly said, If you didn't hear me clearly, then there must be something wrong with your ears, but I don't mind repeating myself. You're really ill-mannered. Ji Yuqi listened with trepidation. No one had ever dared to speak to Miss Shuya like that. This Yun Shirshir, she was kind enough to help her out, but she didn't take the bait. Lin Shuya laughed out of anger. What's your name? Hua Jin said. Yurya? What are you doing? Lin Shuya turned around and looked at him sharply. Who is she to you? Why are you speaking up for her? Stop fooling around, yeah. Do you like her? Lin Shuya asked coquettishly. Do you like her? Is that why you're so protective of her? Chapter 2028. Hearing her question, Hua Jin suddenly fell silent. He looked at Yun Shirshir with a complicated gaze. There were too many inexplicable emotions in his eyes. Suddenly, his lips curled into a smile as he retracted his gaze and looked at Lin Shuya with gentle eyes. How is that possible? Xiaoya, you're the person I love the most. Yun Shirshir was stunned. She looked at him in disbelief. After thinking for a while, she suddenly understood. This Lin Shuya, she was so arrogant and rude. Then she looked at her attitude toward Hua Jin. Could it be that she's the rumored sugar daddy behind Hua Jin? Seeing how Hua Jin accommodated her in every way, her identity must not be simple. She could tell that Hua Jin was pretending to be deeply in love. No matter how good his acting was, he could fool Lin Shuya but not her. He was lying. What Yun Shirshir did not know was that to Hua Jin, words of love were nothing. He pretended to be affectionate on the surface, but deep down he was very cold. Yun Shirshir looked at Hua Jin. However, he smiled gently and looked at Lin Shuya affectionately again. You know that I love you the most, but you still ask me such a question to test me. I'm very hurt. Lin Shuya's expression softened. She glanced at Yun Shirshir arrogantly. Her expression was that of a victor, but it was self-evident. I don't like you being with other women. As Lin Shuya spoke, she pointed at Yun Shirshir arrogantly and ordered, "Make her disappear from my sight." Shaya. Immediately, Lin Shuya's voice was not loud, but her expression was very cold. Her tone was indisputable. Hua Jin bit his lip silently and grabbed the bedsheet tightly. He looked at Yun Shirshir silently, but his gaze was slightly colder. Shirshir, leave. His indifference made her heart ache for him. Yun Shirshir knew that he was lying. At this moment, Hua Jin wished that she was the one who stayed by his side instead of Lin Shuya. But he was only pretending to be indifferent to protect her. Lin Shuya was probably not a simple character. Hua Jin was worried that he would hurt her, so he pretended to be so heartless. Lin Shuya cast a sidelong glance at her. Did you hear that? Hurry up and get lost. Don't be an eyesore. Ji Yuqi gently tugged at Yun Shirshir's sleeve and kindly reminded her, Shirshir, let's go. Seeing Yun Shirshir's indifferent expression, Ji Yuqi hardened her heart and whispered into her ear through gritted teeth, You leaving is really for Hua Jin's sake. Lin Shuya is not someone you can afford to offend. If you really care about Hua Jin, leave this place quickly. Yun Shirshir glanced at her and pursed her lips, but she still did not take a step forward. Ji Yuqi almost dragged her away forcefully. Hua Jin watched her leave without blinking. He clutched the bedsheet tightly, his heart aching. Why? Can't bear to leave her? Lin Shuya asked coldly. Hua Jin took a deep breath and leaned back on the bed. His gaze was extremely empty. Xiaoya, I don't have any improper thoughts about her. No improper thoughts. Lin Shuya snorted coldly and sat down by the bed. She said expressionlessly, The way you look at her is different. Do you think I can't tell? Don't think too much. Chapter 2029. Hua Jin's lips suddenly curled into a smile. He quietly turned his head and gently caressed her face. I'm yours. Lin Shuya smiled sweetly and kissed him gently on the lips. After a few lingering kisses, she pressed her lips against his and murmured softly, "What should I do? I want to be with you forever." She had a perverted obsession and possessiveness towards him. She loved him. She loved him deeply. However, no matter how she looked at it, she could not be with him legitimately. She was born into a noble family. As for her future husband, her family would only choose an outstanding man from an even more noble family to be her fiancé. And this person would definitely not be the lowly Hua Jin. In the entertainment industry, an actor's identity was despised by the real rich. Moreover, the Lin family had already investigated Hua Jin's background thoroughly. Hence, Lin Shuya's father flew into a rage many times and asked her to cut off all ties with Hua Jin. However, Lin Shuya refused to comply. She cried and threw tantrums. She even said something as absurd as, "I can get engaged to anyone you want, but I will never be separated from him." Mr. Lin could not persuade her, and the father and daughter were still in a deadlock. However, Hua Jin felt physically and mentally exhausted. He did not love Lin Shuya. The so-called love was just an act. He was an actor. Since he was a teenager, he had already wandered around the world of fame and fortune. Meeting Lin Shuya was both his fortune and misfortune. Fortunately, she brought him away from the sea of bitterness. Unfortunately, because of her, he fell into hell once again. In order to survive, he could say all kinds of hypocritical words to her. Acting was a piece of cake for him. Of course, he had thought of leaving her. However, was it possible? At the entrance of the hospital, Ji Yuqi looked at her apologetically and sighed. Sure, I'm sorry. I can only ask you to return to the capital first. Hua Jin may stay in Sea City for a few more days. Miss Shuya is here. You have to keep a distance from Hua Jin." Yun Shursher's expression was complicated, but she couldn't say a word. She was upset, not because she had been mercilessly chased away by Hua Jin, but because she felt sorry for him. Especially when she saw Hua Jin forcing a smile and saying insincere words to make Lin Shuya happy in order to protect her. She felt as if a knife was being twisted in her heart. Why did he have to be so petty? Could it be that he was being controlled by her? Why didn't he leave her? Yun Shursher hated him for failing to live up to expectations. She remembered him saying, if he wasn't afraid of living, why would he be afraid of death? She had once asked him, if you're not even afraid of hell, what's there to be afraid of if you're trying so hard to live? But Hua Jin said, there is a kind of living that is more frightening than dying. She didn't understand. However, Hua Jin said, that's why I'm so envious of you. Sure, you're the darling of the heavens. There are some things that you might not be able to understand. Some people can do whatever they want when they're alive. Some people are struggling at death's door, just like the Walking Dead. Everyone's fate is different. After a pause, he smiled bitterly. To me, being able to face the person I like in an open and above-board manner is a luxurious thing. Yun Shursher's mood was very complicated. She said to Ji Yuqi, take good care of Hua Jin. I will. Ji Yuqi called a taxi for her and sent her to the airport. When Qin Zhou received the call, he rushed to the airport. Ji Yuqi had already booked the tickets. Why are you in such a hurry? Chapter 2030. With just a few words, the manager understood what she meant. Let's go back to the capital. There were still a lot of things he was in a hurry to deal with. If not for Yun Shursher's insistence on staying behind to look after Hua Jin, he would have rushed back to the capital long ago. On the plane, Yun Shishir suddenly asked, Qinzhou, who's Xiaoya? Lin Shuiya. You know her? Haha, she's a well-known name. The manager looked at her. Why? Have you met her face to face? Yes. Yun Shishir's face was cold. She's a detestable woman. The manager's lips curled into a smile. Don't be rash and do something stupid. Why? He answered truthfully. The Lin family is incomparable to the Song family. Even if the Lin family's threshold is flattened, it's still a level higher than the Song family. Although the old man from the Lin family is a founding father like the old man from the Song family, the power of the two families can't be compared. Song Enya's father is only a minister, while Lin Shuiya's father holds an important position with military power. If it were the Qing dynasty, he would be equivalent to the commander of the Nine Gates. His influence is incomparable to the Song families. In other words, if the central government wants to deploy troops, they have to abide by the Lin family's wishes. He changed the topic and smiled. Still, you don't have to be afraid of her. Given your man's background, the Lin family will still make a detour when they see you, Yun Shishir. There are 4 prominent families in the capital: the Mews, the Gus, the Lins, and the Songs. These 4 families have deep ties with each other and have a lot of interests involved. The reason why I asked you to keep a distance from Hua Jin is that I don't want you to go against the Lins because of him. I understand, Yun Shishir replied faintly, then leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes to rest. It was already 3 in the afternoon by the time they reached the capital. Qinzhou sent Yun Shishir home and hurried back to the company. Before he went back, he specially said, "Rest well for the next few days. I've applied for leave from the production team for you. Besides, your scenes are almost done, so you don't have to worry about the progress." All right. Let's have a good talk with President Mu. Yun Shishir suddenly stopped talking. When she got home, Yu and Xiao Yichen were already looking forward to her arrival. Before they boarded the plane, Yun Shishir had already called home to inform her. Yu excitedly grabbed Xiao Yichen and rushed to the supermarket to buy fish and meat. They planned to make a sumptuous dinner to reward their mother. Well, although Yu was a boy, she was becoming more and more like a good wife and mother. As Xiao Yichen accompanied him to buy groceries, he thought to himself, when I get married in the future, I must use Yu as my template. I must marry a wife as virtuous as Yu. She was gentle, virtuous, and not only did she do all the housework, she was also very smart. If his wife was as smart as Yu, he would not have to worry about their children's homework. While Yu was picking groceries, Xiao Yichen had nothing else to do. So, he was thinking about something far away. If Yu knew what Xiao Yichen was thinking, he would have shivered. "Mommy, you're finally willing to come back. I thought you didn't want Yu anymore." Yu threw himself into his mother's arms as he grumbled bitterly. Yun Shishir did not know whether to laugh or cry. How could that be? How could Mommy bear to not want Yu? Then why are you only back now? Chapter 2031. Nope. Yun Shishir said guiltily, "Mommy and Daddy's relationship is very good." Then why are you gritting your teeth when you say very good? Detective Yu narrowed his eyes and sensed something fishy. Yun Shishir felt even more guilty. When did I? All right, I don't care about you. You're making me worry all day long. I'm going to cook. Yu ran to the kitchen and started her grand plan. Yun Shishir sat on the sofa with Xiao Yichen and watched TV. Xiao Yichen watched military programs with great interest. She sat beside him and scrolled through Weibo on her phone. She hadn't scrolled through Weibo for a few days and didn't expect it to explode. Life was like a drama. The news about Lin Ji stealing the Best Actress award spread like wildfire. Under Huan Yu's influence, all the major media outlets published articles on their front pages, accusing Lin Ji of stealing the Best Actress award and the shady dealings behind it. Originally, the Best Actress award belonged to Yoon Shurshur, but the team behind Lin Ji had sinister intentions. They did not hesitate to use underhanded means to snatch the award that originally belonged to Yoon Shurshur. It was as though they were robbers. Recently, the crew of Lethal Beauty had been suffering because of this. Gu Xiaoyang turned pale with anger. Halfway through the filming of the drama, the female lead had such a scandal. He was worried that when the drama finished filming and entered the post-production stage, if the publicity wasn't good enough, he was afraid that the public would boycott it. If that happened, the ratings would flop and his reputation would be greatly affected. He had put in a lot of effort into this drama so that it could be a high-quality drama. However, if it flopped because of reasons other than quality, anyone would be upset. Gu Xiaoyang even went to Huan Yu to make a fuss. He went straight to Ji Lin and asked about the rumors online. On Weibo, Tieba, blogs, and all the major internet portals, the scandal of the Golden Eagle Festival was still published on the front page. This was obviously Huan Yu's intention to kick Lin Ji when she was down and trample her to death. Most importantly, Lin Ji was the female lead of Lethal Beauty, and Huan Yu had also invested a lot in the drama. Gu Xiaoyang immediately questioned, Huan Yu is publicizing Lin Ji's scandal. What if it affects the reputation of Lethal Beauty? He regretted it so much. He shouldn't have compromised and asked Lin Ji to be the female lead. If it was Yoon Shurshur, there wouldn't be so much trouble. Now, the netizens on Weibo had a lot of disgust towards Lin Ji. They even suggested that when Lethal Beauty was aired, they would boycott and never watch a movie with that bitch. Gu Xiaoyang was so angry that he almost vomited blood. However, Ji Lin said lightly, if the TV series is good and attractive, how can the audience resist it? Are you sure? Gu Xiaoyang narrowed his eyes in disbelief. It's not like there hasn't been such a precedent. Previously, the A-lister Wen Zhang cheated on Yang Di after marriage, and it was a big deal. After that, the audience boycotted all the dramas that Yang Di starred in. Now, a few years have passed, and Yang Di is still not popular. Can you say that an artist's scandal doesn't affect the reputation of the drama? Chapter 2032. Gu Xiaoyang was speechless. With Shurshur's identity as a victim and the fans she gained from the Green Apple, it's enough to support the show's ratings. Besides, other than Lin Ji, there are so many A-listers in the production team. What's there to be afraid of? What's more, the audience was just here to watch a good show and didn't mind blowing things up. We'll just treat it as a publicity stunt. This way, we'll have a hot topic and a gimmick. Huan Yu was very confident. The audience said they didn't want to watch it, but what about after it was aired? Now that everyone knew that Yoon Shurshur and Lin Ji were archenemies, the audience would be very interested to know what kind of TV series these two would star in. Huan Yu was also thinking from this perspective. Firstly, trampling on Lin Ji now would, in a sense, allow the production team of Lethal Beauty to ride on the hype. Secondly, because of this incident, Yoon Shurshur received a lot of attention. With this attention, the show would definitely be a hit. After all, the cat fight was so exciting, the show would be even more exciting. Ji Lin had been in the industry for many years and was very experienced. He had a good grasp of the audience's thoughts. Moreover, how many netizens would say they were boycotting the show in real life? How many of them would there be among the more than 1 billion people? It wasn't even worth mentioning. Most of them said they didn't want it, but their bodies were honest. Most of the audience for the show rarely went on Weibo. They only cared about the quality of the show and didn't care about anything else. It was fine as long as it looked good. This would only be beneficial to Yun Shirshir. It was the best opportunity to improve her favorability. Missing out on a Best Actress and gaining reputation was not a loss. Gu Xiaoyang was rendered speechless. Ji Lin said, "Focus on your show." Then, he invited him to leave. However, Lin Ji's scandal was still very lively online. Lin Ji's side had already posted 5 statements and apologies, but Yun Shirshir didn't say anything on Weibo. The netizens collectively didn't buy it. Yun Shirshir was speechless as she scrolled through Weibo. It turned out that the feeling of being protected by fanatical fans, it was so complicated. On one hand, she was touched. On the other hand, she was helpless. Some of the brainless fans ran to Lin Ji's Weibo to curse and were banned by the system. They created accounts again. They came aggressively. Yun Shirshir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She opened her homepage and browsed through the comments left by the netizens. Suddenly, a comment caught her eye. "Mistress, evil mistress. Only die-hard fans like you would like such a bitch. Do you know who Yun Shirshir's backer is? Don't be fooled by her innocent and harmless appearance. She is the third party who has pushed out the fiancé of the Mu family's heir, Mu Wanru." Yun Shirshir was shocked. Even though this netizen's comment section was full of criticism, Yun Shirshir was still unsettled. Who was this person? How would she know about her relationship with Mu Yaja? In the industry, not many people knew about her relationship with Mu Yaja. Could it be that there was a mole? Who could it be? Could it be Lin Ji? Yun Shirshir suspected that Lin Ji had used a fake identity to maliciously slander her. Forget it. What a clown. Yun Shirshir was still in shock at the thought of Mu Wanru. After Mu Yaja rushed back to the capital, he had a short call with her. He only said a few words and didn't say anything else. However, Qin Zhou said that Mu Yaja had returned to the capital early to deal with Song Enya's matter.